In the light of this blood-red moon, a hero emerges, facing a horde of monsters that have sprouted from flowers and are attacking him one by one. The hero dispatches them with his extraordinary sword, defeating them with a single strike. We see him saying, "I want more killing." Afterward, in this location, a chariot is being attacked by numerous monsters, and they start to swarm the man. However, a group of warriors comes to his rescue, launching arrows at the monsters and engaging in combat with them. They eliminate the monsters one by one, some using swords, some using spears, and others with accepts. We then transition to the capital city, where the man says, "I feel hungry." The other warriors inform him that they've finally reached level 6 after chasing the hobgoblins all day. A girl suggests that they share their rewards and walk together. The boy is puzzled and says, "I won't be one of them, a goblin hunter." Then his stomach makes another sound, and he says, "I'm useless because of this insatiable stomach." All because of this useless skill, the skill of surgery that he refers to, and he thinks to himself, "I guess I should be grateful that I have a job in the first place." The next day we find these holy knights walking in the street, but they appear arrogant. One of them accidentally steps on a fruit, and another man apologizes to him. However, the arrogant knight kicks him hard and says, "Do you dare speak to me like that?" Then the girl intervenes and tells him that he must know what happens if you insult a holy knight. They will cut off your head. The man apologizes sincerely, and they tell him to apologize and leave. "We've forgiven you," they say. One of the adventurers remarks, "This is unbelievable. It's hard to believe that Lady Roxy is a holy knight just like them." After that, we return to the hungry boy, who says to himself that his shift is almost over and he just needs to endure it until then. However, 3 holy knights appear and ask him if he's truly willing to take over the guard duty for them today. He replies, "Yes, Sir Rafael." Then he throws some coins on the ground and tells him, "This is your reward, go and pick it up." The boy reluctantly bends down to collect the coins, but one of the knights steps on his hand and says, "Sorry, I didn't see your hand there." They tell him that his loud stomach noises make it seem like they're not feeding him. The boy thinks to himself, "This world has the rich and the destitute, and what separates us is the special abilities we possess, unlike me, which is a burden on me. Come on, stand up." They start to stomp on his face, but at the last moment, a female knight intervenes and tells them to stop. It's evident that her name is Roxy Hart. She says guarding the gate is an honorable duty for every holy knight, and it's a responsibility you must uphold. The foolish knight retorts that it's also a duty of holy knights to provide work for the destitute, and that there's a difference of opinion. Then they ask permission to leave, and they walk away, leaving the boy behind. Roxy helps him get up and says, "Please don't move. You're bleeding a lot." She begins to tend to his wounds, and he thanks her for it. She tells him that they are colleagues when it comes to gate guarding. She then gives him a signal, and it's time for her shift to end, so she leaves. Later, we find the boy named Vite in a restaurant, recalling Roxy the knight's words. He says he understands what Lady Roxy said, but he can't risk involving her in this, regardless of her nature. He can't take the risk. And then Amon approaches him and says, "They beat you up again. If this continues, it will end like the one before, endless violence and brutal work. There's only one outcome for this, and it's not a safe one," implying that it could lead to his death. Vite says he'll pray it doesn't end up like the one before. After thanking the person who offered him food, Vite walks along the street, lost in thought. He reflects on his seemingly useless greed ability and wishes he had been born with a more useful skill. He doesn't aspire to become a holy knight, but would settle for being a warrior, merchant, or craftsman. However, he feels that without any special abilities, he will remain a failure forever. Soon, he notices that there are thieves in the city and remembers Lady Roxy. He heads to her immediately and informs her about the thieves he has seen. She confirms the information and tells him that she needs to apprehend them. Then, Lady Roxy requests Vite to take over her guard duty for a while so she can go after the thieves. She expresses confidence in her skills regardless of her appearance. As Vite listens, he suddenly hears the sound of swords clashing, thinking that Lady Roxy has already handled the situation. However, a thief emerges and faces Vite. He initially tries to escape, but he remembers Lady Roxy entrusted this task to him, and he can't allow the thief to get away. He raises his spear and engages in combat with the thief, realizing that the thief was already injured. With a quick strike, Vite kills the thief unexpectedly and with ease. He never imagined it would be this straightforward. His greed ability then activates, significantly boosting his stats. Afterward, Lady Roxy rushes to the scene, very concerned for Vidi's safety. He assures her that he is fine, and it seems like he can hear her inner thoughts. Lady Roxy tells him to report this to their superiors, but Vite hesitates. He tells her that she can attribute all of this to her. Lady Roxy, despite him being the one who took down the thief. He doesn't want to cause trouble for himself, especially if Sir Rafael finds out about it. Then Vite says to himself, I can't afford to cause problems for her. The Lady Roxy told me that, but I was a failure in carrying out my duty without her. Let me show you gratitude, please. He informs her that it's not necessary, but Lady Roxy contemplates making him work for the Hart family or serving the Fleric family. She reassures him that he shouldn't worry about their future because it's in his hands now. Vite recalls his previous future when he was treated as a reject and hopes for a brighter future where he can work with Lady Roxy. He tells her that if he leaves his job with them, someone else will take his place. Lady Roxy replies that she already informed him of the duty to guard the gate, and it's the responsibility of all holy knights. She assures him that it won't be his responsibility no matter what happens. Vite is relieved by her words and tells her that it would be his pleasure. Lady Roxy. On another note, Vite goes to a room and notices that his statistics have exceeded 100. He is amazed by this and wonders how it happened and what the skills of recognition and risk-taking are that he acquired. He then remembers when he could hear Lady Roxy's inner voice when she was worried about him and thinks that must be the risk-taking skill. He also recalls when his gluttony skill was activated and strange things happened to his body, resulting in increased. He believes that with these statistics and this newfound strength, he can defeat monsters now. On the following morning, Vite goes to the market, and as he looks at the armor and swords, a merchant asks him if he's looking for a sword and what his budget is. Vite feels embarrassed because he doesn't have much money. He takes out 2 silver coins, which annoys the merchant, who comments that Vite is very poor and has wasted his hospitality. The merchant tells him that with that meager amount, he can only buy the poor quality weapons from a barrel. Vite reluctantly agrees, thinking it's better than having nothing. He then uses his recognition skill on one of the swords and finds that its durability and strength are 0. He tries several others, and they all have 0 durability and strength until he reaches a black sword, which turns out to be much stronger. Vite realizes that he's capable and no longer feels like trash. Suddenly, Vite hears the sword speaking to him. At first, he thinks someone else is talking to him, but then he realizes it's the sword itself. The sword asks him to buy it and promises to be worthy of his service. Vite is surprised that the sword can communicate with him and eventually agrees to buy it, handing the 2 silver coins to the seller. Meanwhile, a girl named Myne informs her brother Rafael about the rumors she heard regarding Roxy trying to appoint Vite to the Hart family without consulting them. Rafael dismisses the idea, saying there are many candidates to replace Vite and it's not worth the trouble. He also mentions how Roxy and Fleric are part of the 5 noble families that support the kingdom, and complicating things now won't be beneficial. Rafael then leaves the room, and Myne asks him what part of his studies makes him so enthusiastic. He responds by saying that he studies to find the path to immortality, which surprises Myne and makes her laugh hysterically. Rafael leaves her, still enthusiastic about his studies. The sword, now named Vite, congratulates the boy on learning his name. It tells him to be vigilant, and suddenly, a goblin intends to attack him. However, in the nick of time, Vite kills the goblin with his sword and dodges its attack. His gluttony skill and statistics increase significantly, and he marvels at the sudden improvement. The sword then makes Vite aware of an impending goblin horde attack. Vite engages the goblins one by one, killing them efficiently. As he fights, his gluttony skill and statistics keep increasing, and by the end of the night and into the morning, his skills have risen by at least 1,000 points in each category. The sword comments that Vite is probably full by now. Vite listens carefully to the sword's explanation about the gluttony skill and how it steals statistics and skills in exchange for not gaining experience. He realizes that he is still at level 1 because the skill has been absorbing his experience points. When Vite asks the sword how it knows all this, the sword replies that they are similar in that regard. And the gluttony skill is not something that should be known to others as it challenges the sacred law. This revelation shocks Vite, and he decides that he should fight alone. However, the sword reassures him that it will be by his side since Vite is carrying it. Vite then asks the sword if it accepts him as its master, to which the sword replies that it doesn't choose, but the fact remains that Vite is its master now. Vite believes that's enough for today, but the sword tells him to collect the goblin ears for his reward. Afterward, Vite states that he has gained 3 silvers and 8 bronzes from the goblins, which he believes will be enough to buy meat for dinner. However, the sword interrupts and reminds him that he must maintain it first and treat it like a precious gem. As Vite walks, he bumps into a man who scolds him for not paying attention. To his surprise, he sees the young girl with the man and she pleads for help. The man starts to kidnap her, and Vite tries to assess the man's skills but fails as the man activates his stealth skill, hiding his statistics even from Vite's identification skill. Vite's frustrated and asks the sword what to do. The sword explains that this skill keeps the man's statistics hidden even from identification, making it impossible for Vite to assess his capabilities. Vite decides he can't ignore this situation and begins chasing the man who is tying up the young girl, declaring that even someone as worthless as him can have a purpose, possibly being a plaything for the Holy Knights. The man laughs. As Vite watches the man, the sword warns him that the man is very powerful and that this is his last chance to retreat. However, Vite, now feeling the strength he has gained, believes he should help those in need. The young girl cries for help. The anime begins with the worshipper Lepas, who has been living since ancient times and is credited with teaching people special skills and powers. One day she noticed a child who wasn't eating when she asked him, he explained. They was sad because Leal was not fair. The holy knights and warriors possessed incredible skills, but despite following Leal, he had weak abilities. He believed this was the reason he was abandoned. The old woman reassured him, explaining that in ancient times, there were no skills or statistics and there were no monsters. Everyone was equal back then. The child cried and wished to be born. In that time, the scene shifts to another worshipper named Sahara, who is chained and terrified by a brutal man who strikes her head and informs her that she will be a plaything for the Holy Knights after he leaves. Sahara cries, and her tears fall heavily. Suddenly, Vito arrives and comforts her using his supernatural power. He breaks the large chains. However, the terrifying Marie turns and Sahara is shocked. Her eyes grow pale. Vito tells her not to be afraid and that he will protect her. He then communicates telepathically with someone and informs Sahara that to ensure her safety, he must first retreat so that he can later rescue her and take her to safety. Finally, he suggests that she should fight him. At this moment, Vito responds to the command and quickly takes Sahara away from the passage. However, the pursuing man threatens them, saying that if he catches them, he will cut their heads and place them in boxes. Then Vito drops one of the boxes on the man. As he rises from the top of the box, he delivers a precise blow to Fool's face, causing a minor injury. At this point, the other party uses his word, which glows yellow and swings it towards Vito. However, the person communicating with Vito telepathy instructs him to strike through his weapon. Now, when follows the instructions, he manages to break the foe's sword and lands a powerful blow before finally finishing him off. But before delivering the final blow, he interrogates him about who ordered him to abduct the girl. The man in pain reveals that the one who ordered it is named had Flair. This revelation shocks Vito, and he shoots the man. The scene then shifts to Vito and the girl Sahara outside of that strange place. He assures her that she will be safe. Now, Vito starts getting to know her, and she tells him her name is Sahara. He offers to take her to a good restaurant to have a meal. The scene transitions to a beautiful restaurant and Vito approaches. The man grilling kebabs on charcoal and asks for 2 pieces. Sahara begins to eat the food, feeling incredibly happy because she had never tasted meat before. It was a luxury for her impoverished family. As she eats, tears well up in her eyes as she had never experienced anything so wonderful before. Vito then gives her the piece he was holding. The scene switches back to the old woman as Vito brings Sahara to her home. She rushes towards Sahara, embracing her, and then thanks Vito for saving the girl from peril. Vito modestly places his hand on his head as if embarrassed and tells them there's no for thanks. He explains that he does his duty and performs his job to the best of his abilities, seeking no gratitude except from God. Vito then speaks to Sahara, advising her that no matter how tough things may be, she should always smile to find happiness even in current situation. He recalls a moment from his childhood when his father gave him same advice, though he didn't understand it back then. However, his father's words have helped him greatly in reaching this stage of his life. That's why he wants Sahara to survive as well after their conversation. He bids farewell to her and returns to his place. At this point, Vito gains a new skill, the ability to wield a sword with one hand. This is his first technical skill, and he doesn't realize its significance. His sword, however, informs him that this is very valuable as technical skills, provide secret techniques and arts. This will allow him to strike twice in a singly attack. Vito understands that this is sharp edge. The sword had mentioned earlier. Moreover, if he were to receive a single blow from the kidnapper of Sahara, he would die instantly. So he decides not to use this technique for now, as it wasn't advised by the sword, which reveals that Vito was in the midst of a rescue operation for a young girl and didn't want to jeopardize it. The sword continues to talk to Vito, emphasizing the role of luck in battles and how being strong doesn't guarantee victory. The time luck played a significant part in Vito's victory over the kidnapper. This realization prompts Vito to seek to become stronger, relying less on luck. He then remembers that tomorrow is his first day working with the Hart family and how he can't go there in his current condition. He panics and screams because he forgot to buy new clothes. The scene then shifts to a bar where a man talks to the bartender about the latest news. He mentions that Mr. Mason was defeated by a holy dragon and Galia sundering the news from a warrior friend. The bartender inquires about the fate of the Hart family, and the man replies that Mrs. Roxy will succeed Marmus, but it was Mr. Mason who controlled the Holy Knights to prevent them from going out of control. The bartender was uncertain about whether Mrs. Roxy would be able to control the Holy Knights, like Mr. Mason did, and he concluded that there would be no good coming from the Flair siblings. The old woman inquires about Toe, and the bartender tells her that he used to pass by every day after work, but they didn't do so today, causing him great concern. The next morning, we see the Holy Knights neighborhood with beautiful green trees and abundant pure water created. A breathtaking view. Vito is dressed very elegantly and is strolling through this neighborhood admiring the Holy Knights. He is amazed by the enormous size of the place. He encounters Roxy, who is waiting for him. She greets him warmly and is delighted to meet him. Vito is left speechless by her beauty, which worries Roxy. She tells him that he looks handsome today and that he should groom himself from time to time. She believes he looked very handsome. Today, she then takes him to show him his workplace, but stops at a grave. Roxy talks to the grave, which contains her father, mentioning that Vito will be working there from now on, and she is confident that things will be even more exciting in the palace. Vito asks if this is her father's grave, and she confirms that it is. She explains that he met a holy dragon in Galia 5 days ago and lost his life there. We learn that Galia is a continent filled with monsters, and it's one of the major duties of the Holy Knights to keep it under control. This year, the responsibility for this dangerous mission fell on the Hart family. It's a risky task, but it wasn't supposed to be fatal. However, a holy dragon that hadn't left its lair in over 1,000 years was encountered, and it killed all the Hart family's men. Vito reflects on Roxy, who has always been there to encourage him when she needed him the most. He realizes that he is completely ignorant and asks her not to. Sad, the beautiful girl introduces herself as the eldest of the Hart family and expresses her desire to work together to make the palace a joyful place. She wants to rely on Vito and tells him that he can inform her of anything. He desires. Vito agrees, to assist her and stand by her in everything. She smiles and extends her hand to greet him if Vito were to touch her. His telepathic ability would activate. Haru then arrives to introduce herself and explain that she's the head servant in the Hart family's palace. She advises Vito to behave appropriately as a servant of the Hart family, and he agrees. Vito then goes to eat, and the girls are quite impressed by him later. Vito is seen doing his Joban. Oliver reminds him not to overexert himself and to take breaks. It's been a week since he joined them. Manura comments that she initially thought he was odd talking to his sword, all time and trembling when he ate meat. Vito reveals that it has been 5 years since he last ate meat. Haru approaches him to introduce the beautiful girl, but Vito doesn't respond because he's very hungry and distracted. She repeatedly calls out to him and asks if he's okay. Vito remembers his father, who used to call him by the same name. His father was skilled in a monster hunting operation. Haru asks why he's called it Vito, and he tells her it's a suitable abbreviation for his name. She reminds him of the importance of making the Hart Palace a joyful place and that he is now a part of their family. Vito asks her to call him V instead of Vito, but she refuses his request. Suddenly, Vito faints, and when he wakes up, He finds himself in his room with a note telling him to take a day off and rest. He then talks to Hisward, and the sword explains that the urge to feast on souls is now present within him. If he doesn't seek souls, he'll die of hunger or lose control and tact. Anyone in his path, Vito is horrified by this revelation. The sword then offers some advice explaining that when his hunger reaches its limit, Vito will be visible in his eyes. Vito looks in the mirror and is shocked to see his eyes have turned. After that, we see all these knights standing saying, "Let's shun a lot," and "Let's harvest a lot." Because the hunger enhancement, skill eyes active hunger enhancement, is a temporary power that allows you to use the Carnegie's skill effectively. Your night vision improves and you can track prey by their scent. Weaker prey will fear you and freeze in place. Then Vito goes to this goblin area to satisfy his craving. He easily dispatches them one by one with his sword. However, the number of goblins he kills is not enough for him. Then heads to the goblin forest where he encounters many powerful monsters. He attacks one of them and kills it, causing the rest to fear him and flee. He quickly pursues one of the fleeing creatures and kills it to satisfy his hunger and put an end to this craving. After reaching a certain point, his sword informed him that he has consumed enough. Vito expresses his desire not to feel this way again, but the will need to hunt monsters and feed in their souls from time to time to satisfy his carnage. Skill. Suddenly a massive monster, the Goblin King, appears. There's not much difference in stats between Vito and this creature. The sword advises Vito to continue fighting even if he gets injured and to use his carnage skill. However, Vito becomes afraid when he sees the monster devouring a human. The sword reassures him that humans are a good meal for monsters, and this motivates Vito to attack. The Goblin King Vito waits for the right moment and delivers a powerful blow with his massive sword. However, it doesn't immediately defeat the monster. The Goblin King retaliates and veterinarily avoids its attack. The sword tells Vito that he can't defeat the monster just by evading its attacks. He must attack with all his strength. Vito chooses the right moment and delivers a powerful blow, finally killing the Goblin King. This victory significantly boosts Vito's stats and unlocks a new skill, health regeneration. However, Vito is left exhausted and depleted. The sword informs Vito that he did well with his current stats and will be able to enter first level of his abilities. Vito is determined to continue his journey. Vito is surprised by this revelation and asks the sword why it wants all the stats it has gained since they met. The sword informs him that it's another form for itself and that by granting Vito some of its stats, they can both become stronger. Vito hesitates due to the sword's apparent greed, but the sword explains that if Vito doesn't accept this condition, he will lose the right to wield it. Vito can choose to become stronger on his own or make the sword stronger as well. Reluctantly, Vito agrees, realizing that the sword is his only partner. Suddenly, the sword emits a bright flash, and Vito can feel the surge of power. The sword has taken all of his. Vito believes this is the new greed skill. After the sword finishes collecting all the stats, it transforms into a magical bow and informs Vito that someone has been watching him for a long time. This is the perfect time to shoot an arrow. Vito is surprised because he doesn't have any arrows with him, but the magical bow tells him to pull it and the arrows will appear on their own as Vito pulls the bowstring. Arrows materialize, and he can aim anywhere. He successfully hits the monster that was watching him. Astonishing. Everyone Vito is amazed by this newfound power. Another note, after obtaining the Goblin King's ear, Vito places it in front of the orphanage where he saved the girl in the first episode. This will provide food for the orphans for a long time, and with this, our episode concludes. Stay tuned for more thrilling episodes, but please subscribe to the channel and enable the notification bell to receive updates on all our latest content. The episode begins at Heart Palace, where we see Princess Roxy leaving the palace wearing strange clothes, as if she's in disguise, heading to some undisclosed location. Following her, there's a man named Vite, who doesn't recognize her. He tells her to stop or he will kill her, which greatly startles Princess Roxy. When she turns to face him, he is shocked to see her dressed so unusually. The princess explains that she was very scared, which is why she looked different, and Vite apologizes for his reaction. Curious about where she's going in such attire, Vite inquires. The princess hesitates for a moment, then approaches him, saying she'll tell him where she's going since he already saw her. She smiles and whispers the truth in his ear, revealing that she's on a secret inspection mission to the town. Vite now understands the reason for her disguise. Princess Roxy warns him not to tell anyone about this and emphasizes that her maid, Haru, should not find out, as she wants to maintain a certain image befitting the Hart family's nobility. Vite apologizes for causing the delay and assures her that he'll get back to work now. The princess then seizes an opportunity and presents Vite with an excellent idea. She plans to assign him to accompany her during the inspection as her escort. Afterwards, Vite and Roxy head to the town, with Roxy walking ahead. Vite calls out to her, asking her to wait for him. She points her sword at him to silence him and informs him that people will notice if he calls her by name again. Indeed, she returns to him and requests that he act appropriately, and that people will notice if he calls her Roxy again. Vite expresses his confusion, as this is what she told him before. She asks him to stay silent about it. Princess Roxy then ponders an alternative name for Vite to use when addressing her, settling on Rocky. The sword remarks that this is very similar to her real name, but Vite manages to silence it again. When the princess heard Vite's apology, she felt sad and sorry for him because he was so concerned about bothering her. Vite assured her that she wasn't a bother at all. She was just very excited to go out with him. However, Vite was embarrassed by her words, and the sword mocked him. This made Vite quite angry, and he was about to throw the sword to the ground, but Princess Roxy stopped him. She wouldn't allow him to treat his sword with such roughness. The sword was delighted, as this was expected from a holy knight who understood its purpose. Then the princess asked Vite to take out his sword so she could see it better, as she hadn't had a good look at it before. Vite hesitated because he didn't want to give her the sword. He considered that she wouldn't understand it, but the sword communicated with him, warning him not to tell her about his skill. The devouring, which, once he tasted the souls, would make him uncontrollable and driven by an insatiable desire for more. If he didn't do this, he would die of hunger or lose control and attack anyone in his way. Vite would not allow the princess to discover this skill, so he handed her his sword for her inspection. When she took it out of its sheath, she was amazed by its appearance. She put it back into the sheath and told Vite that it needed more care, as she would later learn about the Hart family's blacksmith. Vite agreed, and the sword was thrilled because it would be renewed. Then Vite and the princess continued their stroll until they reached the market, where there were beautiful fresh vegetables, fruits, and fresh meat. Everyone in the market was happy and content, and they were all working diligently. As the princess walked through the market, she noticed some wonderful grapes. The merchant told her that she had excellent taste and that these grapes had been freshly picked from the Hart family's vineyard that morning. The princess requested to taste them, and the merchant agreed. Then the merchant gave her some grapes to taste, and they found them incredibly delicious. Princess Roxy mentioned that they were naturally grown in their land, almost revealing her connection to the Hart family. Realizing her slip, she was shocked, but then quickly regained her composure. The sword urged Vite to come up with a cover story. Vite told the merchant that they had a relative who worked for the Hart family, diverting the conversation smoothly. The merchant didn't seem to care much about this and went back to his work. Princess Roxy was relieved, and she thanked Vite for handling the situation skillfully. At that moment, a holy knight arrived at the market, and everyone looked at him in fear, not understanding why he was there and what his purpose was. As the knight passed by Vite, the sword sensed a desire to feed on his blood, but Vite quickly told it to be quiet. The knight heard him say that and turned his gaze towards them, making Vite extremely nervous. The knight approached them, and Vite apologized profusely, explaining that he didn't mean anything by it. The knight told Vite that he couldn't hear him properly. Vite raised his voice, but this angered the knight because he couldn't hear him at all. The knight attempted to kick him, but Princess Roxy intervened, telling him to stop because Vite had already apologized. The knight looked at her and asked who she was to dare speak back to a holy knight. He felt like he had seen her before, and the people in the market recognized her as Princess Roxy. The sword communicated with Vite, telling him they should pretend to be lovers and nobody would believe she was really Princess Roxy. So they pretended to be a couple. Princess Roxy then told Vite that she had prepared a great breakfast for him, and he should eat it as she wouldn't prepare it for him again if he didn't eat it. Vite agreed to eat, understanding that she wanted him to appreciate her efforts. They continued their act as a couple and walked away. The onlookers realized that the woman with Vite couldn't possibly be Princess Roxy. As the crowd dispersed and returned to their work, Roxy and Veet went to a secluded spot, hiding from everyone. Then Veet expressed his apologies to Roxy, but she reassured him that it was okay. She was used to such situations. She encouraged them to continue their journey together, telling him to move on. Veet, however, thought that accompanying Lady Roxy might be quite challenging for him. As they continued, they reached a market, and Roxy asked Veet if there was something he found interesting. Veet noticed gemstones and pointed them out to her. She mentioned that she was a girl before anything else and that such things naturally caught her attention. The vendor then revealed that the stones were set inside raw ore, and one couldn't know what was inside until they opened it. They were sold for 10 copper pieces each, and he offered to let them try their luck. The vendor said that his skill in quickly identifying the best gemstone within the ore could be quite useful. Veet decided to buy one and opened it, only to find it empty. The sword warned him to be cautious, as merchants often took advantage of people's skills. Roxy, on the other hand, was fascinated by the stone and didn't seem like a holy knight. The vendor then offered Veet a discount on a silver piece if he wanted to gift it to his sweetheart. Roxy returned it to its place and thanked the vendor for letting her take a look. They left, and Veet asked her if she knew any of the current warriors, mentioning Oliver and Minerva. She replied that she had questions for the current warriors, not the retired ones. As they talked, they overheard a man speaking about dead goblins, and there was a rumor that the murderer was a wandering monster. Roxy asked the people around about the orphanage in the poor district where they got the goblin ears as donations. She wanted to investigate this further and find out who donated them. Veet suggested that she ask the warriors for more information about the wandering monster. Roxy requested that Veet take her to where the warriors gathered, so she could inquire about the monster. At this point, Veet was taken aback, thinking that he may be the wandering monster in question due to the recent changes in events. Later, Veet and Roxy entered the place where the warriors gathered, but the vendor told them it was a private area for regular customers. However, when he looked at Veet and recognized him, he became joyful and introduced Roxy as Veet's new partner. The man expressed his hope that Roxy would take good care of Veet. Then he talked to Veet, mentioning how his appearance after all this time with a girlfriend was a pleasant surprise. Veet became flustered, realizing that the man had misunderstood the situation and he had gotten it all wrong. Roxy, feeling embarrassed by the conversation, accidentally broke her cup. She apologized for her clumsiness, and the man at the restaurant commented that he had seen many warriors who struggled to control their stats and ended up breaking dishes. His sword teased Veet, suggesting that her embarrassment was due to him. In response, Veet also broke his cup, and the sword claimed that it proved his stats had increased. The restaurant owner then overheard the conversation about goblin corpses, with their ears still intact, and Roxy inquired further. She suggested that any warrior seeking rewards might have hunted the goblins and found a mountain of goblin corpses with their ears intact. Roxy speculated that this indicated that a wandering monster might have migrated from another area. The restaurant owner explained that whether they were headed to gather supplies or sell goods in the capital, they would have to pass through goblin territory. However, there was a mysterious creature roaming those parts, deterring people from traveling as no one wanted to die. Veet felt responsible for this situation and became somber. An old man entered and recognized Veet. He informed them that the common theory was that the wandering monster was a lich, which would be a grave threat if it were true. He explained that this was why the knights were mobilizing to deal with the situation. The old man revealed that a friend of his, a warrior, had informed him about it, making it quite certain. The sword conversed with Veet, expressing concern that they might have to deal with holy knights, and Veet was in mortal danger after recently having his stats drained. The old man inquired about Roxy's curiosity regarding the wandering monster. Veet realized that if Roxy joined the hunt and saw him, the situation would turn extremely complicated. Just then, a group of warriors entered the restaurant, unimpressed by the establishment. One of them requested food and drinks for the group. Approaching Roxy, he invited her to join them and have a good time together. Suddenly, one of the warriors at the restaurant placed his hand on Lady Roxy's shoulder and invited her to join them and enjoy their time together. This action infuriated Veet. Lady Roxy, however, swiftly and skillfully struck the warrior, sending him crashing into the wall. Another warrior criticized the man who had initiated this, saying that only someone from the Holy Knights could pull off such a move. To everyone's surprise, they then realized that she was Lady Roxy, the Holy Knight herself. The warriors quickly prostrated themselves on the floor and asked for her forgiveness. They even offered her money as an apology for their behavior. Lady Roxy put the money aside, and she explained that the people they swore to protect saw them as sources of fear, which was something she deeply regretted. The warriors were astonished by her words and listened attentively. Lady Roxy elaborated that the Holy Knights were there to protect the people, and that in this world they could laugh alongside the kingdom's citizens. She shared her father's dream of a harmonious world and mentioned that she shared the same dream. The old man compared her to Sir Mason and commented that, until their dream was realized, he would serve Lady Roxy. Afterward, Lady Roxy and the warriors played together, laughing and sharing a joyous time. She acted just like one of them, completely down to earth. On the other side, Veit took his sword to a blacksmith for maintenance. The blacksmith handled it with expertise, and the sword gleamed with satisfaction, feeling like a new blade. After leaving the blacksmith, Veit thanked Lady Roxy for her help, as his sword was in dire need of maintenance. She responded by saying that she should be thanking him, as she had learned a lot about the wandering monster thanks to him. Veit then asked why she hadn't been informed about the hunt. She explained that it seemed that the Flarek family was overseeing it and hadn't bothered to inform her. Suddenly, they heard the voice of one of the knights telling Hadar to keep his distance, but Lady Roxy intervened, asking Hadar to let him be. She explained that they had found a lost child and the knights were taking him under their protection. This saddened Lady Roxy, as Myne was participating in this task with Hadar. The boy, whose name was Rafael, thanks Veit for his help. Veit takes the child and stands beside Lady Roxy. She mentions that she will take care of the boy now, but questions Rafael about why he didn't inform her about the monster hunt. Rafael explains that he assumed she was busy due to her father's death. Lady Roxy reassures him that she's perfectly fine, and they excuse themselves, leaving the restaurant. However, Hadar is still standing there and confronts Veit, asking why he's giving him such an unpleasant look. Rafael intervenes, telling Hadar to let it be. Hadar challenges him one last time, but Rafael dismisses him, and they leave with the other knights. As they exit the restaurant, the child who was with them earlier sticks his tongue out at the knights and declares his hatred for the Holy Knights. Lady Roxy apologizes to him and explains that it was due to her attire that she wasn't recognized earlier. Veit then approaches the child, asking if he's lost. The child confirms he is and can't find his mother. Veit reassures him that they will help him find her. The boy is overjoyed and profusely thanks them. Later, they are seen walking through the market. Veit recalls that he was once lost too, 5 years ago after his father's death, and a holy knight took care of him. He wonders about what might have happened to that holy knight now. As the day turns into evening, Veit tells Lady Roxy that he's not sure if they can continue searching today. The boy suddenly hears his mother calling for him. He runs toward her, tears of joy and longing in his eyes, and bids farewell to Veit and Lady Roxy, thanking them for all they've done for him. Veit and Lady Roxy are filled with happiness, but Veit suggests returning quickly as they may face some problems on their journey. Lady Roxy asks Veit to return home, and he agrees, expressing his hope that days like these continue forever. He then goes to his room and asks his sword about hunting monsters without Lady Roxy knowing. His sword suggests using a mask that will change their appearance to anyone who sees them. Veit is delighted with this idea and says the sword is perfect and very helpful. Later, Veit goes to a gemstone seller, takes a precious stone, and gives it to Lady Roxy as a token of gratitude. He explains that it symbolizes his new job and warm meals, thanks to her and the friends he considers family. Lady Roxy is overjoyed and accepts the gemstone as a sign of their bond. Lady Roxy asks Veit what he wants in return for this precious gift. She suggests that he might want some meat, general provisions, or even a sharpening stone for his sword. His sword insists on getting a sharpening stone, and although Veit initially refuses any compensation, the sword continues to persuade him. Meanwhile, the Holy Knights are gathered, and all the evil in the world is reflected in their eyes. Rafael says they will discuss the campaign to Galia. The episode concludes by encouraging viewers to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications for exciting upcoming episodes. The episode begins with these soldiers watching a mysterious superhero named Veit. Since he wears a mask that they describe as a terrifying visage, everyone quickly flees upon seeing him. Afterward, Veet removes his mask and communicates with his sword telepathically. He seems quite intrigued by the eerie mask and is determined to maximize his immense strength stats before the Holy Knights set out to destroy his village and target him. The scene then shifts to the morning at 0 a.m. where Veet is trimming trees in a large garden. At this time, a woman named Roxy approaches him and informs him of a secret mission he must accompany her on. Without hesitation, Veet agrees and they get into a car. While driving, Roxy shares some information about a piece of land to the east belonging to the Hart family, which is exceptionally beautiful and abundant with vegetables and crops. Veet jests, asking if their mission is to pick grapes, but he's only joking. After half an hour, they finally arrive at their destination, and Roxy's mother, the woman in a green cloak with beautiful hair, is watching them. When she sees Roxy, she rushes toward her, and it appears she is her mother. When she inquires about Roxy's condition, her mother tells her that she's feeling much better. She then asks her mother about the man who came with her. Roxy points at Veet and informs her that he is their new servant, brought along to assist them on the journey and act as their protector. She also mentions that she wants him to meet everyone. Veet proceeds to introduce himself, feeling quite embarrassed. Roxy's father then tells Veet that his name is Aisha Hart and expresses his delight at their visit. Veet thanks them for their kindness. Then, Veet's sword communicates with him telepathically, mentioning that Aisha appears to be a polite and refined woman. Afterward, Hart uses her hands to signal Veet to come closer. When he approaches, she asks him if he is fond of her daughter Roxy. When Roxy hears this question, she becomes embarrassed and her face turns red. Veet, too, is extremely surprised and displays evident embarrassment. Then her daughter scolds her for that question, because it embarrassed her so much, and she shouldn't have asked it. Hart, her mother, tells her she didn't mean anything by it. At this point, Veet begins to speak, expressing his interest in Roxy. He kneels on one knee and tells her that he wants to serve her until his last day. Both Roxy and her mother are very pleased with this beautiful declaration. However, Roxy starts feeling nervous and tells them that she needs to go and rest for a while in her room. At this moment, Hart talks to Veet about this matter, as he didn't do anything wrong. She explains that Roxy always flees when situations become awkward as she is quite shy. She then shares a little story about Roxy's past, mentioning that she used to cry a lot when she saw a spider and would make a big fuss, even screaming. Veet is quite surprised to hear this and tells her that things have changed as her daughter has become a very accomplished holy knight, and she is now feared by many. Hart continues the conversation with Veet, especially after losing her husband. She suddenly had to take on the role of the family's head, which was quite unexpected. Veet reassures her, saying that Roxy is an excellent holy knight and people trust her. She excels in her duties as the head of the family. The scene then shifts to Roxy in her large room, where she opens a box and it plays soothing music. Tears well up in her eyes as she looks at a statue of her father in her hands. She remembers her father training her when she was a little girl, holding her hand and instructing her to hold her sword next to her chin. Her father was very proud of her, never expecting that she would become a holy knight just like him. She tells her father's statue that she wants to be just like him, protecting the weak in her town from evil and external threats. Returning to the present, Veet is seen picking red grapes. A man with a big hat approaches him and gives him a glass of fresh grape juice. When Veet drank the grape juice, he was extremely delighted because of its delicious taste. The man explained that this drink was the strength elixir and had personally assisted the lords in cultivating this land for countless generations. Everyone in this land, including Sir Mason, drinks this elixir. Veet then asked if Roxy helps with the harvest every year. The man explained that she does, but only for a limited time, as she mainly enjoys hunting monsters. This harvest involves most crops, not just grapes, which is why many monsters appear in search of food. The man then pointed to the location from which the monsters, particularly the kobolds, come. At this point, the man noticed Veet's stomach rumbling, indicating that he was hungry from all his hard work. They both laughed at this lighthearted exchange. The scene shifts to Veet carrying grapes in that area. Roxy approaches him and tells him to go back without her, as she plans to stay there for a while. Veet starts walking back, but suddenly he encounters a girl holding a large sword taller than herself. He approaches her with curiosity, and when she stands in front of him and looks into his eyes, he is taken aback because her eyes look exactly like his, covered in red. Veit tries to use his sensing ability to learn more about her, but finds no information. She then gives him a strange look and walks past him. Veit calls out to her, asking her to wait, and inquires about her purpose in that place. She tells him that she came to pursue the kobold monster. She then assures him that they will meet again and leaves the area. Veit then asks his sword through telepathy about the girl, but the sword informs him that it doesn't know anything about her, which surprises Veit because his sword usually knows everything. This time, it has no information to share, and it hasn't provided any details about her. The sword's lack of knowledge frustrates Veit, and he expresses his annoyance. The sword explains that there are many things it doesn't know because it doesn't possess omniscience or the ability to engage in divination, astrology, or summoning demons and spirits to know the past. At this moment, Roxy arrives carrying 2 bags and asks Veit to carry one of them. Veit is surprised because she had earlier told him that she would stay there for a while and wouldn't accompany him. Then Roxy tells Veit that she is going to collect some grapes, and when she looks at the girl, she explains that she's from the city of Galia. Veit informs her that he's heard that Galia was completely destroyed, and Roxy confirms that this is true. 1,000 years ago, Galia had a powerful military, but a wave of monsters attacked, leading to the collapse of their civilization, and most of its people perished. However, there are survivors, although she doubts that she has ever seen someone from the original Galia before. At the end of their conversation, Roxy tells Veit that they must return to the palace, so he follows her. He tells her that he's heard about the monsters and is concerned about her fighting them alone. She reassures him that she won't be alone. The warriors working with her are holy knights, and she's a holy knight herself, so they won't have any problems. Suddenly, Roxy notices that she has dropped some grapes, so she rushes to pick them up with Veit's help. The next morning, a thick fog covers the grape fields in Roxy's farm. The farmers realize that the monsters have consumed all the grapes and feasted upon them. Roxy, accompanied by Veit and some of her men, arrives at the scene. When Veit sees these monsters, he recognizes them as kobolds, and Roxy informs him that dealing with these monsters is her task. As they approach the area, they sense something unusual near a tree. A massive monster suddenly appears, astonishing both Veit and Princess Roxy. Veit has never seen a creature like this before, and he experiences a strange feeling as his mouth waters upon seeing it. His sword warns him that he will be extremely hungry as it notices his drool. Veit understands that this is not the time for such a reaction. Before taking any action, Veit consults his sword to check the monster's rating. He discovers that it is a level 50 monster, which shocks him. His sword explains that this monster is a crowned beast, a formidable creature that brings sorrow, born from centuries of accumulated grudges. It's a unique and powerful entity, quite different from ordinary monsters. Roxy reassures the frightened townspeople that she, as a holy knight, will protect their land and all its residents from the monsters. She requests that they seek safety and leave the preparations for the battle to the warriors. Her words are met with gratitude from the villagers. However, Veit's sword insists that she cannot handle this alone, as the monsters are too powerful for a young holy knight like her. One of the warriors speaks up, saying that they will go and prepare for the battle properly, which will take some time. Veit is left to ponder the situation, realizing that facing a level 50 monster is beyond his current capabilities. He is determined not to allow Princess Roxy to die. In the night, they observe a large number of monsters and Veit watches them from a hilltop. He converses with his sword, acknowledging its role in the coming battle. It appears that his sword's enthusiasm for the upcoming fight amuses Veit. However, he knows he cannot ignore what is happening in Heart's Lands, and he will not allow Princess Roxy to perish. Later, as the night falls, Veit surveys the monsters from the mountaintop. He's somewhat amused by the excitement his sword exhibits as it takes on the role of the hero once again. He knows he can't ignore the situation and will not allow Princess Roxy to die. In the darkness, he spots a group of monsters, and his sword informs him that there's a crowned kobold, and most likely, the rest are smaller kobolds. Veit wonders what his plan should be and determines that he will fight them with all his might. His sword transforms into a massive spear, and he prepares to engage the monsters. He unleashes his ferocity on the smaller kobolds one by one, activating the skill of slaughter. Veit's combat prowess is impressive, but the crowned kobold remains, along with very few smaller ones, and they are unable to keep up with his pace. The large kobold leads his smaller minions in confronting Vite, and a brutal battle ensues. Vite fights them with extreme ferocity, determined to eliminate them all. However, when he attempts to strike the large kobold with an arrow, the monster manages to catch. Vite is shocked by the creature's strength. Vite's sword advises him to get closer to the monster so they can cut it down, and Vite swiftly moves towards the large kobold with the intention of killing it. The large kobold possesses a skill called Destruction Punch, which can pierce through armor, shatter bones, and crush internal organs. The sword warns Vite about this devastating attack, and he remains in place to avoid it. Despite his caution, the monster delivers a powerful punch to Vite's shoulder, causing him to fall to the ground. The sword calls out to him, urging him to continue the battle. Vite musters his strength and returns to his feet, ready to confront the kobold once more. He strikes the monster and manages to sever one of its arms. Then the sword told him, "Pretend to be unconscious. I've learned a clever trick." The beast attacked him with its strength, throwing him away. Fido quickly approached it and used his slaughter skill to kill the monster. The sword explained that he could now use the secret art of level 1, which would require 10 of his current stats. The sword transformed into a more powerful form, and Fido used it to strike down the monster. Afterwards, Fido was exhausted and cried out loudly. We then moved to the next day, with many people astonished by the number of monsters he had killed, bearing the marks of the sword and arrows. Roxy suggested that the arrows might be enchanted, and she asked who could have done this. She then spoke with her mother, expressing her disappointment at the devastation caused. She mentioned a girl from Galia who had been seen recently, rumored to be even stronger than the Holy Knights. Roxy found Fido very tired and suggested they take a break. Her father approached Fido and asked him for a favor, stay by his daughter's side and support her. Fido was hesitant, believing that someone like him had no place beside her. Roxy reassured him, explaining that she didn't want him to have authority or power like a holy knight, but his willingness to help was valuable to her. She admitted that she used to be an ordinary girl with unremarkable skills, but had supported her husband in various ways. She felt that being the only parent of Roxy had posed certain challenges. In the night, we see Fido killing many monsters, and the sword tells him to carry a secret like the slaughter skill. Fido responds that there are no monsters stronger than goblins here. The sword warns him that time is running out, and he must decide what's next. Fido, looking sad, says that he has no right to stand by Lady Roxy's side. Then, an old man enters the scene, saying that Mr. Hato will join the lich hunting mission, possibly seeking quick glory. They plan to send him to Galia, where he'll become monster food. The store owner advises people like him to stay in safe places. Another person will go on the mission to Galia. Fido is surprised to hear of another mission to Galia, even though Mr. Mason just died. Next, we see Roxy standing in front of her father's grave, telling him that she's been assigned to the Galia mission. Fido appears and tells her not to go to Galia, fearing she might not return. Roxy insists that she has made her decision and leaves Fido behind. A man talks, mentioning that the Hart family is a source of annoyance for the Fleric family and the rest of the knights. Rumors suggest that the Hart family prepared for this mission to Galia as well. A girl talks to Hato, telling him they will finally get rid of the source of annoyance, and he can handle the rest. Hato says he wishes she could come along, but she tells him it's not just for fun. It's a search. Her brother tells Hato to rely on him to take care of the lich matter. Fido speaks up, saying he can't reverse official orders, and he can't stop Lady Roxy. However, he hasn't allowed them to treat people like trash and cause more suffering. Suddenly, the knights appear behind him, and one of them says, "This boy must be the one they call dead." Fido looks at them in astonishment. So what will happen with these villains, and how will Fido act in this matter? Stay tuned for the 5th episode to find out everything. The episode begins with a standoff when Fate was fighting the Holy Knight Hato Fleuret and his men. Hato is the second grandson of the Fleuret family. Hato's men requested that Fate should be left to them for the fight, and Hato agreed. The men then attacked Fate, but he easily defeated them. The remaining men fled when they saw Fate's face. Fate called out to Hato, but he didn't respond. Fate then told Hato that he had never been afraid of him, as he couldn't be mocked or intimidated by his strength. He also revealed that he was the second son of the Fleuret family, but Hato seemed to be trembling in fear. Fate expressed his desire to see Hato's Holy Knight strength, which he boasted about so much. Afterward, Fate looked at Hado's skill screen and found the Holy Sword technique, a special skill required to become a Holy Knight. He doubted Hado's abilities and how he could acquire a skill like that. Fate asked Hado if he could break a Holy Sword. Hado replied that it's impossible because a Holy Sword made from Orihulkon is incredibly powerful and no one can defeat it. The fight then began between them, with Hado using the Holy Light, but he couldn't touch Fate with it. Suddenly, Fate disappeared from in front of Hado, reappearing behind him. Fate quickly cut Hado's sword in half, much to Hado's disappointment, as it was a holy sword. Fate then threw the severed part of the sword to the ground in front of Hado and asked him to approach to retrieve it. However, Hado was too scared and kept his distance, much to Fate's amusement, as Hado was supposed to be a holy knight. He doesn't know that the holy knights escape in this way. Hado attempts to stand but falls to the ground. Fate approaches him and makes him stand on his feet, knowing that Hado needs a lesson, like how bold dogs require strict discipline. He takes Hado and smacks him against the wall, continuing to strike him. Hado asks him to stop, but Fate won't forgive him. He knows that Hado treated everyone as if they were insects, and he sent Lady Roxy into danger. Hado begs Fate to let him go, but Fate throws him aside. Fate then uses his power to strike a projectile toward Hado to extract his skills. After that, we see Hado lying on the ground, and Fate approaches him. Hado questions why Fate is torturing him this way, wanting Fate to just kill him instead of this severe punishment. Fate explains that he has questions for Hado and wants him to answer. Hado realizes that Fate wants to ask him about Roxy and promises to cancel her mission to Galia if Hado saves him. However, Fate does not listen to him. He has decided to kill Hado as an act of revenge. Fate pleads with them desperately to spare him, and Fate asks Hado to be quiet, then stabs him in the body. This act is not for Roxy. It is Fate's revenge. As Hado dies, Fate's stats increase, and he activates the skill of the Holy Sword technique. Fate has now become a Holy Sword Knight. His sword tells him that his capital will never accept this. Still, he can now access the second level. Fate asks his sword to transfer him to the second level, and the idea of having Hado's statistics inside him makes him feel disgusted. Fate successfully moves to the second level, and is now known as the Great Harvester. His sword tells him that the curse in its blade can even cut through eternity. Fate is delighted that his sword can cut through anything. In the early morning, we shift to Lady Roxy as she prepares to travel to Galia. She wears the necklace and all her servants bid her farewell with sadness in their eyes. Roxy requests that they not do so and assures them that these 3 years will pass quickly. She bids them all farewell, and she says her goodbyes to Fate with great sorrow. Fate tells her to take good care of herself. Roxy leaves and leaves a recommendation letter with Hero to be delivered to Fate. She tells him that if she works in another lord's palace, she'll be far from the reach of the Fleuret family. Fate expresses his concern for her until the end and mentions that he cannot accept the letter. He'll carve his own path as a warrior from now on. At night, the sword speaks to Fate, remarking that it seems he has made his decision. Fate confirms it and says he couldn't stop Lady Roxy from going to Galia, so at least he can support her. Hero gives him the earnings from his work in the palace and adds a severance package. He reminds Fate not to forget the pride that comes with serving the Hart family. Fate bids them farewell and goes to say goodbye to his friends, telling them he is heading to Galia. The scene then shifts to Roxy, who is addressing her soldiers, saying that she has taken the position previously held by her father, Mason Hart, and they will head towards the borders. Fate is delighted that his sword can cut through anything. In the early morning, we shift to Lady Roxy as she prepares to travel to Galia. She wears the necklace and all her servants bid her farewell with sadness in their eyes. Roxy requests that they not do so and assures them that these 3 years will pass quickly. She bids them all farewell and she says her goodbyes to Fate with great sorrow. Fate tells her to take good care of herself. Roxy leaves and leaves a recommendation letter with Hero to be delivered to Fate. She tells him that if she works in another lord's palace, she'll be far from the reach of the Fleuret family. Fate expresses his concern for her until the end and mentions that he cannot accept the letter. He'll carve his own path as a warrior from now on. At night, the sword speaks to Fate, remarking that it seems he has made his decision. Fate confirms it and says he couldn't stop Lady Roxy from going to Galia, so at least he can support her. Hero gives him the earnings from his work in the palace and adds a severance package. He reminds Fate not to forget the pride that comes with serving the Hart family. Fate bids them farewell and goes to say goodbye to his friends, telling them he is heading to Galia. The scene then shifts to Roxy, who is addressing her soldiers, saying that she has taken the position previously held by her father, Mason Hart, and they will head towards the borders. She explains that their goal is to take down the dragon that has awakened after a full millennium to protect the royal capital, Sephert, and its people. She asks Maria if she has joined as well, to which Maria responds that she will be right behind her, wherever she goes. A soldier named Mogan approaches them, and Maria inquires if he's excited about witnessing the natural catastrophe, the strange dragon that everyone is talking about. Mogan responds that he cannot deny it, as most warriors seek the opportunity to test their abilities. However, he volunteered because of Lord Mason. He used to work under his command and says his words may sound arrogant, but he wants to avenge him. Roxy asks if his family didn't object to him going to Galia, and Mogan explains that his daughter, Rainey, asked him to bring back some traces of Galia since he comes from a long line of researchers, and he's the only warrior in the family. Roxy expresses her feeling that the journey will succeed with people like them. The scene shifts to a girl asking Rainey if she has a moment and inquires about the Lich, nicknamed the Monster Corpse, which has become the talk of everyone. Rainey finds magical arrows in a book and asks if they're different from magical fireballs. She explains that it's a power inherent in a black sword, one of the deadly Sin's weapons. The deadly Sin's weapons are made from a substance that can handle magical power at a high level. If she can control magical power, she can expand the potential of her skills. In the morning, Fate arrives at Tetra, which is a trading hub on the way to the royal capital. The sword asks if he has visited it before, and Fate confirms that he passed through it 5 years ago on his way to the capital. A man asks Fate if he's also heading to Galia, and Fate responds affirmatively, but not today, as he fears monster attacks during the night. The following morning, he'll set off. He then leaves and on the way gets hungry. The sword advises him to eat something and gather information. Since this is a large trading town, he might find a suitable sheath for his holy sword technique. The sword suggests he could even choose one adorned with Aura Halcon, although magical crystals could also be good. Fate mentions that he has some money from Miss Harrow's severance, so he sees no harm in enjoying some meat today. On the other hand, we see this young man named Set, who begs these warriors to help their village. If they don't deal with the issue, their village will be completely destroyed. The warriors mock him and ask if he thinks these sweets are enough to persuade them to hunt monsters. They throw the sweets on the ground, and Set tries to pick them up again. But one of them steps on him, warning him that he needs to prove how serious he is about getting their help. Suddenly, Fate arrives and prevents the man from doing what he's doing. He knocks the man to the ground, and the others attempt to strike Fate, but his strong grip causes them pain. They become afraid of Fate and ask him to let them go. In a rush, they all flee. Fate tells Set, "You're safe now." Thanks for your help. Set is surprised to see that the person before him is Fate. Fate then recalls a memory from his past when he was trying to draw water from a well and some children obstructed him. They taunted him, saying that all he's good at is making those weird stomach noises, calling him a failure, and threw stones at him. The scene shifts to when Fate was sitting with his father and monsters arrived. His father confronted the monsters and defeated them. Fate was overjoyed that his father had triumphed, and when they returned home, Fate prepared a herbal remedy for his father who was frequently injured. He presented the concoction, and his father found it extremely bitter, but was happy because his son had learned about herbs for his sake. Later, Fate's father passed away, and Fate sat in front of his father's grave, mourning and weeping deeply. The people behind him commented that his father possessed the skill of the Holy Spear technique, which is why he remained the leader in that place. Suddenly, Set's father and others start throwing stones at Fate and tell him to leave because he's worthless and of no use. They continue pelting him with stones and demand that he departs immediately, leaving them very saddened by these painful and bitter memories. Returning to reality, Set bends down to Fate, begging for help. Phi, in his thoughts, realizes that this is Set, the son of the village leader who banished him. Set admits he knows he's selfish, but he needs Fate's strength. Suddenly, the sword speaks to Fate, telling him that this is in his best interest, so he should control his hunger no matter what. Fate agrees and informs Set that he will take care of their monster problem. Set is initially upset, not believing Fate's willingness to help, and they leave. Fate tells himself that he'll lie to himself if he says he no longer hates them. But the village holds memories of his father. When they arrive in the village, Set's father is surprised that Fate has brought the exiles back, and he doubts that Fate could hire warriors effectively. However, when Set's father witnesses Fate's strength and sees him defeat some warriors, he apologizes and promises to find warriors tomorrow. The two men with Set's father are concerned about possible monster attacks and suggest using Fate as bait to buy time. Fate tries to leave, but Set stands in his way, begging him to let the situation pass and apologizing once again. Set then takes Fate to a room, offers him a drink, and repeats his apologies. Fate reassures him, saying he's used to it. He asks about Set's wife and learns that she fell victim to the monsters because the village is still poor and the village leader holds absolute. Set mentions that he used to believe his father was always right, but realized he needs to improve for the sake of his daughter, a little girl who appears and demonstrates how Set has completely changed. Set informs Fate that it's all thanks to his daughter's influence that he has changed. Fate is touched by this and remembers his father, who used to play with him and put his hand on his head. Fate then asks Set to tell him more about these monsters. Set explains that the monsters appeared about a month ago, with multiple witnesses confirming their presence. They can fly, which is a significant concern. Fate realizes the situation is serious, and Set suggests these might be ghoul monsters, known for their intelligence and initial reconnaissance attacks before launching a full assault. Suddenly, Fate's stomach growls loudly, indicating he's still hungry. Set decides to get him some food. The sword speaks to Fate, suggesting that people in small villages usually think problems can be solved by hiring warriors, and this has become a common belief. However, if these monsters can fly, it changes everything. As Fate is eating, he feels extremely dizzy and loses consciousness. This surprises Set, who believes that Fate may have eaten something strange. However, it's revealed that Set's daughter gave Fate some candy her grandfather had given her. Set realizes that his father was serious about sacrificing Fate and may have drugged him. Set tries to wake Fate up, but with no success. Suddenly, the flying monster swarm appears in the village. What will happen next? Can Fate wake up in time to save them from this dire situation? All will be revealed in the next episode. The adventure begins at dusk, where a multitude of terrifying monsters emerge. These monsters fill the town's sky, causing panic among the locals as they breathe fire all around. Consequently, all the houses turn to ashes due to the relentless inferno. In the midst of this chaos, we see a character named Vit who is asleep and has been drugged. He attempts to call out for help with his sword, but to no avail since he cannot be heard in his unconscious state. As Vit lies in a deep slumber, a man named Set prepares a remedy to wake him up from the drug-induced sleep. The village is renowned for its exceptional herbs. Meanwhile, another man is searching for Vit but doesn't get the chance to do anything as one of the monsters seizes him and devours him. Returning to Vit, he awakens when Set administers the antidote, and he is bewildered by the circumstances. Set apologizes to him and reveals that it was Vit's own father who orchestrated this. Upon learning of his father's involvement, Vit asks Set to stay at his house for safety. He grabs his sword and ventures outside. The village appears to be a nightmare, as every corner is engulfed in flames. The monsters show no mercy, devouring both humans and animals indiscriminately, reducing everything to ashes. Set informs Vit that they will face a significant problem if the monsters continue their attacks from above. Vit checks their assessment screen and discovers that these monsters are at level 27 and possess a fireball skill, which is extremely dangerous. Vit is compelled to wield the Great Reaper in his sword's form. The sword transforms into the Great Reaper, and Vit confronts the monsters, who attempt to strike him with their fireballs. However, Vit slices them in half with his mighty sword and engulfs them in flames. This surprises Vit, as he thought the sword would only cut them. The sword explains that the fire resulting from the cuts is a different matter altogether. The sword informs Vit that the monsters will launch a broader attack instead of concentrating on hitting him individually. Vit decides to strike them with a powerful blow to eliminate them all simultaneously. He delivers a blow that kills them all at once. At this moment, Vit activates his Carnage skill and gains a new ability, Fireballs. Afterward, Vit gazes at the sky and notices that the remaining monster is the leader of all the creatures. He learns that this monster is at level 47 and possesses fireball and fire resistance abilities. The sword warns Vit that the monster will approach him to attack with a fireball, presenting an opportunity for Vit to strike. In response, Vit rushes toward the monster, striking it in the mouth before it can release the fireball. In the meantime, the monster dies, and Vit activates his Carnage skill, enhancing his stats and gaining the fire resistance skill. Thus, the gruesome battle concludes. As the dawn breaks, Vit, Set, and the young girl stand, lamenting the destruction in their town. Set reveals that his father did not survive, and only a few villagers, including himself, managed to escape. Vit is asked to inspect the village's condition, and he finds that it is beyond repair, with the soil no longer suitable for farming. Set is surprised that Vit, his friend, chose the dangerous path of becoming a warrior when he could earn a substantial income with his identification skill. Vit contemplates his Carnage skill, which can conquer anything, and explains that he had no choice but to fight. Upon hearing this, Set decides to search for any work within the land to support his daughter. The girl smiles at her father's decision and goes to play with a beautiful butterfly. Set then requests Vit to strike him as a way to repay him for what he has done. Vit agrees, and he asks Set to tighten his teeth well. Vit strikes Set in the face, causing him to fall to the ground. Set cries and thanks Vit for his actions, then asks him to take good care of his daughter. Afterward, Vit stands before his father's grave and speaks to himself, expressing his mixed feelings about the village. He confesses his hatred for seeing the village disappearing despite its flaws, but acknowledges that the memories of the time he spent there with his father remain precious. Vit reminisces about his father, their conversations, and shared laughter. He promises his father that he will be okay from now on, standing taller and stronger. Meanwhile, we shift to Roxy and her men who are approaching the region of Lancaster. Roxy intends to get there quickly to see the provisions, and as they get closer, Mogan urges her to be cautious about Lord Lancaster. Roxy doesn't understand his warning and questions him, but Mogan refuses to elaborate, promising that she will see everything when they arrive. This infuriates Roxy, and she calls Mogan the Stingy. Back to Vit, he is in a cart with one of the men, yawning. The man asks him to stay vigilant during the journey to avoid any trouble and offers him 3 gold coins as payment, relying on Vit's skills. Vit apologizes to the man and explains that he is a skilled fighter, equivalent to a novice holy knight. At this moment, they are stopped by roadblocks, and they are told that the road is closed. They are instructed to leave behind anything of value if they are concerned for their lives. Vit gets out of the cart and informs the man that he will deal with these individuals. The man, who has a wife and children, is worried about their safety. Vit assures him and faces the people at the roadblock. The situation becomes tense, and suddenly the sword falls from the sky, creating an explosion and scattering the individuals. The sword informs Vit that only one person can do this. At that moment, a girl, the owner of the sword, appears. She tells Vit that he owes her regarding those kobolds and needs to deliver on that promise. Vit agrees, and she boards their cart. However, due to the weight of her weapon, the cart overturns. The girl scolds her sword, urging it to return to its normal weight. Vit is astonished by her ability to change her weapon's weight. While on the journey, the girl asks Vit for his name and learns that he is Vit the Carnage. They continue their travels together. Then Vit is surprised and asks the girl, Myne, how she knew that. She reveals that she has a skill from the deadly sins, and it's apparent to her. She introduces herself as Myne and mentions that she's hungry. Vit offers her some dried meat, and she takes most of it. However, he advises her not to eat it all. The owner of the cart informs them that they've arrived in the town. The scene shifts to Myne in the city, playing and noticing something following her. When she turns around, she spots the monsters and screams for help. A knight appears and reassures her that he will defeat the monsters. He swiftly eliminates them, impressing Myne, who approaches him to ask his name. He introduces himself as Lord Lancaster of Butter and Meat, whose real name is Rudolph. The cart owner adds that Lord Rudolph is preparing to welcome the delegation heading to Galia, including Lady Roxy. Vit inquires if he means the one with Lady Roxy, to which Rudolph affirms they will be arriving in town shortly. The sword humorously comments on Vit's situation, noting that he was chasing after Roxy and ended up getting ahead of her. It points out that considering the number of people in the delegation and their provisions, it's logical that they are slower. The cart owner offers Vit the 3 gold coins, but Myne claims them, saying she saved him. The cart owner bids them farewell and leaves. Vit then has a conversation with the sword, asking it where they should go now. The sword suggests finding a place to rest. Myne falls asleep on his shoulder, and he carries her on his back. Vit questions how he ended up in this situation, and the sword explains that it's not a morning person and prefers to stay silent. As they walk, they come across people conversing with Vit, welcoming him. The boy mentions that Rudolph welcomes them and then departs. Vit looks at them and notices a mark on their backs. Later, when they reach the city, the soldiers don't allow Vit to pass, as only citizens are permitted to enter. Vit notices a different mark on the boy's back, leading him to wonder what's happening in the town. The sword explains to Vit that these different social layers might exist in the town, and the Lord here doesn't even try to pretend that they don't follow a class system. People adore him greatly. The scene transitions to King Rudolph, who exclaims that their idea of the celebration doesn't reflect his family's greatness, but rather the Lancaster family's superiority over the Hart family. He confronts them for trying to humiliate him. Rudolph kills the boy who pleads for forgiveness, and the other warrior who fled during the monster hunt. The remaining soldiers are terrified of what Rudolph might do to them if they upset him further. The scene then shifts back to Vit upon his arrival at the house. He places Myne on the bed and comments on her exhaustion, expressing surprise that she is still alive. Vit asks the sword how Myne knows about the deadly sins, and the sword reveals that they are old acquaintances who occasionally meet. The sword is one of the weapons of the deadly sins. Vit inquires if Myne mentioned anything about the sin skills, and the sword explains that it's time for him to know more about them. The sword reveals that there are many skills born through challenging the laws, which is why they are called the skills of the deadly sins and the weapons of the deadly sins. Among them, gluttony is considered a sin because it has the potential to subvert the sacred leveling system. Vit points out that as soon as gluttony tastes souls, there's nothing to stop it. The sword tells him it's his punishment, and they all have to pay the price one way or another. Vit becomes annoyed as he is ridiculed and insulted for having a skill without any benefit, making him hungry all the time. He has to continue killing to survive and make use of such power. The sword advises him to be patient and to maintain emotional stability, as emotional disturbances can cost him a lot. Vit is warned that if he's not careful, gluttony could consume him. He is advised to become strong enough to resist and maintain a state close to hunger. Then, he can satisfy gluttony's hunger slowly. Vit wears a mask and heads outside to satiate his gluttony gradually. Suddenly, a sand monster emerges, causing the sword to transform into a bow. The sword commands him to use the fireball before releasing the arrow, and at that moment he's amazed as he managed to add the fireball skill to the magic arrow. They release it, causing a massive explosion that easily defeats the sand monster. The gluttony skill is activated, but another sand monster and more sand creatures appear. However, Vit can't handle them. On the other hand, we switch to Myne, who wakes up feeling extremely hungry. She eats some pieces of meat and unexpectedly reads an announcement offering a great reward for defeating the sand ghoul. The person in front of her tells her that not even Sir Rudolph can kill the sand ghoul, and if it's not defeated, death awaits them all. On the other side, we return to Vit, who is still fighting the sand monsters, and he's getting used to it, feeling like he's taking a sip of water each time. He tells his sword, "I think the time has come. We can't let your cravings go unsatisfied in the end." Suddenly, Vit smells an unfamiliar scent and believes that there's a powerful sand monster nearby. The scene shifts to the enormous sand monster, the leader of the sand creatures. It surrounds the weak soldiers, and they can't stop it. However, Vit strikes the monster from behind with a fiery arrow, revealing that this monster is his prince. The monster becomes enraged at the strike, and the soldiers warn Vit that he can't defeat it alone. Still, Vit pays no attention to their words because he wants to satisfy his hunger. He prepares his special fiery arrow, and the monster hurls many fireballs at him. But the fiery arrow cancels their effects and hits the monster. Vit then flies toward the monster and strikes it with his sword, but the monster remains unaffected and launches a sandstorm attack. If it reaches Vit, it will crush him with the rocks within it. Vit transforms his weapon into the Great Reaper and weakens the monster with this powerful enchantment, then attacks it again. However, the monster suddenly starts to disappear, and the jewel on top of its head attempts to vanish into the sands. Viat jumps into the air and transforms his weapon into a bow, charging it with a massive burst of fire. He pierces the ground until he hits the jewel, completely obliterating it. This grants him the sandstorm skill, but Viat is saddened by the chaos he caused. The sword reassures him that there was no other way to win, and it was necessary. The warriors thank Viat and express their astonishment, as they've never seen a warrior do what he did. Viat, however, finds it strange that everyone believes he has special equipment, to which the sword replies that he won't need anything else. He can steal the enemy's skills and boost his stats. Most people rely on equipment because they can't do that. The next morning, Viat goes home, and Myne tells him she's going to hunt the sand ghoul. Viat informs her that he already defeated it. This angers Myne, and she erupts in flames of anger. Viat tries to calm her down by suggesting they split the reward in half. He goes to claim the reward, and the clerk gives him 100 gold coins for defeating the great monster. Suddenly, Sir Rudolph arrives, mocking Viat and claiming him as his servant since a holy knight's decision must be obeyed. Myne interjects, telling him that it won't work, as she got to him first and mocks him for being a little child. In a fit of rage, she strikes him with her weapon, sending him soaring into the sky. Afterward, they quickly leave the area to avoid causing any further trouble. And that's how our episode ends. Stay tuned for more episodes, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to receive updates on all our new content. In a very exciting episode, Viat encounters the leader of a nearby village near the city of Galia. At that time, they will face the Lord of the Skeletal Halls, whose stats exceed 1 million, and he is a very high level. Will Viat and the village leader be able to defeat this lord to uncover all the secrets? This episode begins when Viat and his companion Myne are riding in a carriage and having a conversation, getting to know each other. They share some dried meat, and Viat is surprised by Myne's extreme hunger and voracious appetite. He learns that he was the one who bought that food for her. Myne explains that her anger burns a lot of calories, which piques Viat's curiosity. He wonders where all the food she eats goes since her body appears very slim. During this time, Myne suddenly starts glowing with fiery light, shocking Viat. The carriage comes to a halt and the wheels seem to be sinking into the ground because they have become heavier. Not just the sword she's carrying, but Myne herself as well. Viat decides to repair the wheels and offers to do it in exchange for some extra payment. While Viat is occupied with fixing the wheels, he notices Myne has disappeared. He looks around and eventually spots her heading in a particular direction. He follows her with haste and eventually arrives at a place where some children are playing together. The sword then informs Viat that they are now close to the city of Galia, which means that the threat of monsters is much greater. The sword believes that there must be powerful people in this city protecting it from monsters. Viat continues to explore the city and comes across a man with white hair and a very powerful sword. At first glance, it appears that he is a samurai warrior. Viat asks him about the location of the mayor because he wishes to stay in the village for some time. The man then reveals himself as the leader of this village and a holy knight who defends the village with all his strength. He sets a condition for Viat. If he wishes to stay in the village, he must first engage in a short duel with him. At that moment, Viat activates his identification skill, causing his eyes to change to a strange color. The samurai quickly understands what's happening and assesses Viat's strength. He informs Viat that he is at level 1, but his stats exceed 2 million. Viat is astonished by this revelation because he realizes that the samurai is an incredibly perceptive individual who can also use the identification skill. The leader then unsheathes his sword with a swift motion and challenges Viat to a fair fight to test his strength. The battle begins with Viat launching a powerful attack, but the samurai easily parries it. He then delivers a surprising blow that causes Viat to drop his sword, and the samurai places his own sword at Viat's neck. Viat apologizes for his weakness, but the samurai tells him not to apologize. He explains that he senses a purpose behind their chance meeting and welcomes Viat to the village. However, there's one condition. Viat must train under his guidance during his stay. Viat is perplexed by this and questions why the samurai wants to train him, especially when they are strangers. The leader dismisses it as the whims of an old man who loves combat. Wyatt can't shake the suspicion that the samurai's intentions are more complex. The samurai further reveals that he is still in his prime and not fully utilizing his other skills. He believes that Wyatt's fighting style, suitable for battling monsters, is less effective against humans. Therefore, he offers to guide Wyatt to become much stronger than he currently is. Wyatt is intrigued and ponders this development, as he realizes that the samurai wants to train him without expecting anything in return. Wyatt comes to terms with his decision to accept the samurai's offer, feeling grateful for the encounter. The other man introduces himself as Harem Barbados, the leader of the village. Just as Wyatt is about to share this information with Myne, she appears. Harem quickly discerns that she is a highly skilled warrior, and after a brief consultation, they decide on the place where they will be staying. Myne is exhausted and looking forward to some relaxation. Wyatt informs her of the location, and they both prepare for what lies ahead. The scene then shifts to the house. While Myne was in deep slumber, Barbados and Wyatt continued their training outside the house. Barbados explains that they will begin with hand-to-hand combat as it is the best way to control their statistics. He teaches Wyatt the proper stance, instructing him to keep his right shoulder forward, bring his arms closer to his body, and slightly lower his stance to prepare for both offensive and defensive moves. However, Wyatt is highly tense, and this is not in his favor. The more he tenses his muscles, the weaker and slower his movements become. Barbados emphasizes that true strength emerges when one is relaxed, and it can also trigger a deeper unconscious. They begin their training, with Barbados evading all of Wyatt's attacks. Suddenly, Wyatt's eyes turn red, and Barbados notices this change. He informs Wyatt that his movements are improving gradually. Barbados attacks once more with a double kick, but Wyatt manages to evade it with his improved physical condition. At the end of the day, Barbados tells Wyatt that they will move on to actual combat exercises the following morning. He then departs, leaving Wyatt to contemplate the presence of monsters in the area. As Wyatt starts to sense the scent of monsters, he wonders if there are any monsters in the castle. Suddenly, Barbados shouts when he opens the door. Wyatt rushes over and finds Myne lying on the ground with a large amount of food beside her, but she has consumed nearly all of it, leaving nothing behind. The leader went to one of the villagers to bring some food from them to prepare for Wyatt and his friend Myne. On his way, he looked at the castle as if it held many memories for him, gazing at it with a mix of emotion and sadness. Then, he took out a small dagger and contemplated it. We then move to the leader's house, where we see pictures of him with his wife and their son, who is a young boy. He continues to watch Wyatt as the young boy bears a strong resemblance to him. The sword informs Wyatt that this young boy is the leader's son, and there seems to be a significant reason for him being the leader of a village in such a remote place. In the following morning, Wyatt and the leader head out early to continue their training. The leader hands Wyatt a weak and fragile wooden stick and asks him to block his attacks with it. Wyatt is surprised because the stick seems extremely feeble and liable to break easily. However, the leader tells him that he trains with his hands, so there's nothing to worry about. He knows he'll handle it. Wyatt agrees and prepares to start the training. The leader, Harem, charges towards Wyatt with his powerful sword. Wyatt attempts to block the attack, but is astonished to find that Harem predicted the angle and path of the sword. Wyatt decides to use as little strength as possible, feeling like he's slipping off the sword. Harem notices that Wyatt is gaining control over his stats now and ends the duel, thanking Wyatt greatly. At this point, Myne joins them, having a surprise for her friend Wyatt. She playfully draws on his face, and though Wyatt is annoyed, he doesn't retaliate. As the sun sets, Harem, Wyatt, and Myne sit down to have dinner together. The leader informs Wyatt that they will depart the next day, and Wyatt acknowledges that he is correct. He then expresses his gratitude to the leader for everything he has done for them and asks Myne to thank him as well. However, Myne is in a different world, consuming food voraciously as if she has never seen such a meal in her life. Wyatt becomes annoyed by her behavior and apologizes to the leader for her actions. The leader, however, insists that she should eat until she is full, as there is still plenty of meat and vegetables left. Myne then explains that she no longer has a sense of taste, as all the food tastes the same to her, which is the price she pays for her anger skill. She further mentions that she has a mission and a goal to achieve. Wyatt then asks if there's something specific about the castle. The leader responds that this is the Hazen region and this castle used to be his. Wyatt and Myne are shocked by this revelation, and the leader proceeds to tell them the story. 15 years ago, he left this castle due to military orders. His son was inside the castle when it was attacked. During his absence, his son tried to defend the castle to the best of his abilities, but tragically lost his life. As a result, his family and the people of his land suffered at the hands of a crowned monster. Since then, Hazen became a part of the Witch Lord's dominion, and his family fell under his control. Wyatt is stunned by this story and stands up, asking the leader where he is going. The leader replies that he needs to step out for a while. Wyatt leaves at night, with Haroun following him, as he knows Wyatt is headed to that place. Wyatt is surprised by Haroun's presence, but is then asked by Haroun to join him. He sees it as an opportunity to find peace from his past. Myne also joins them and tells them that she will protect the village for 50 gold pieces, reassuring them not to worry. Then Wyatt and Haroun approach the castle, and Wyatt uses hidden magic to silently eliminate one of the guards on the castle wall. Haroun is amazed by this, and Wyatt explains that these are magically enhanced arrows with the effect of Disruption Sandstorm skill, a technique that is challenging to deal with and was discontinued from study in the capital. The sword praises Wyatt for all his accomplishments. They continue to move, encountering a multitude of monsters, and decide to launch an attack on them. Haroun wields his sword, and Wyatt uses his Zaddy sword, which has transformed into a spear, to kill all the monsters. They then enter the castle and head to the second floor. On the second floor, they find Haroun's wife and son in excellent condition, unharmed by the recent events. They welcome Haroun, and his wife tells him they were waiting for him for a very long time. Haroun is overjoyed to see them safe and approaches them with excitement. His son asks him if he has completed the mission entrusted to him by the king. Haroun confirms it, and then Wyatt is surprised and asks his sword about what is happening. The sword explains that they are undead now, for certain. Wyatt is astonished and says all this, and they're dead now. Then Diana speaks with Haroun, telling him that he must rest. She also asks him for a keepsake, but Lok takes out his sword and attacks Haroun, saying that he had been guarding the castle in his absence for years and years that never end. While you cared only about work and abandoned us for your duty in the capital, the monsters harmed us. How can you come back after all this time to kill us? Fit said to Haroun. Fit continued, I can dispel the illusion, but I need the Black Reaper. His sword Sif added, you can sever the effect caused by the skill, but I will also kill them. The souls devoured by the appetite cannot move on to the other world. It's like being trapped in eternal damnation with no hope of salvation. Afterward, Luke attacked Haroun with all his strength. Haroun defended himself against Luke's blows and asked Fit to leave so he could deal with his family alone. Fit agreed, saying, I'll go find the Lord Lich. Luke attacked Haroun again with full force, astonishing Haroun. He said, you've become very strong, Luke. You've followed all my teachings without missing a single day of training. The scene shifted to Fit outside as he searched for the Lord among the people. A distant light appeared, and Fit saw it, pointing towards it. Then, the massive monster appeared. Fit noted that all of its stats exceeded 1 million and attacked it with a powerful blow. Sif said, I can still control the undead. The others requested that he save them. Haroun added, I'm ready now. I've cut their tendons to immobilize them. He showed his wife, then remembered the words of his wife and son when he was leaving for this dangerous mission. Haroun said, if I had returned earlier, I could have ended their suffering now. Haroun used his power, and his sword emitted a bright light. All the monsters cried out, and Fit rushed to help him to defeat the huge monster. They harnessed their powers together, and a powerful light emerged. They killed the enormous monster, and everything came to an end. Afterward, Luke and Diana lay dead on the ground. Haroun expressed his regrets, as they had been waiting for him all this time. Then, Luke and Diana appeared before him. Then the radiant spectral remnant of his son said, This is not your fault, Father. His wife reassured him, You saved us in the end, and we are happy for that. Haroun felt deep sorrow and said, I wish I had made this decision earlier, and there was no need to leave you in the first place. I knew that you were more important to me than any orders. Nevertheless, I let you down, and it was excruciating for me. Please forgive me. His son replied, We are fine now, and you should do what you find suitable for us, please. Haroun agreed to make amends for his actions and assured them that he would live in a way that honors their memory. He apologized to his son Luke for the delay and gave him a small dagger as a token of his appreciation. Luke thanked him for the dagger, and they shared a beautiful smile, embracing in their final moments. Afterward, the flames from the monstrous apparition's eyes attempted to strike Harun, but Fit intervened at the right moment and struck it down, eliminating the effects of the appetite skill. Harun said that no one should interrupt this beautiful scene. Suddenly, Harun felt extreme fatigue, but he found relief shortly after. His eyes returned to their natural color. Harun was content because the night Harun had managed to have a proper farewell with his family. Following that, the specters of his son and wife disappeared entirely and left. Harun said that they had waited until he was done with what he needed to do, and he would join them very soon. Then they left the castle, and Fit said, "You've exceeded your limits." Harun informed him that he believed it was due to fighting alongside him. See Fit's sword remarked that it seemed possible, but it also required him to accept someone with his skill. Please note that this translation captures the general meaning of the text, but it may not fully capture the nuances and emotions in the original language. Then Harun informs Fit about a herd of monsters they need to deal with immediately. Suddenly, many skeletal structures appear, and they begin to attack them, killing them. After completing this mission, they return to the village, where they find that Myne is waiting for him. She says to them angrily, "You were late." Fit tries to calm her down so she doesn't unleash her anger skill. At that moment, Harun hands her a bag full of money as an apology for the delay. She becomes very happy with the substantial amount of money. Myne says the money is needed for rebuilding the village, and money doesn't lie. You'll learn that if you live long enough. Fit is amazed by the long duration she mentions, as he imagined that her age would be similar to his. Harun then says, "You've not changed at all. You were an example of a great warrior." Myne responds, "You have sharp perception, and perhaps you'll catch up to my level after another millennium of training, Harun." Everyone is astonished by this long duration, and she informs them that her words are true. As humans have their limits, but she's a spectral being who cannot die. It's time to repay her kindness. Harun notices that Fit's eye color has returned to normal and tells him that he suffers from a condition that compels him to fight monsters periodically. If he doesn't, his eye turns red. Harun says, "When you've done what you need to do, please return here. I have an important matter to tell you from another perspective." Then they transition to a wicked gang preparing a philosopher's stone capable of healing any illness or injury. They never imagined they would find it. Myne's sister interjects, "Perhaps immortality isn't such an unattainable goal, my brother Rafael." Suddenly, the elderly man interrupts them, informing them that during their absence, Hato and those with him were killed. It turned out the corpse wasn't a monster but a warrior. Rafael becomes very angry and wishes to find out who did it for a severe vengeance. With this, our episode concludes, and they promise thrilling events in the upcoming episodes. Our episode begins when Veit and Myne are returning in that carriage, where Myne eats some pieces of meat, then gives Veit another piece and wipes it on his head with her hand. She sits next to him and falls asleep on his leg. Veit is amazed and asks her about it. She tells him that his leg is soft while the ground is hard, so she can't sleep on it. She advises him to stop talking so she can sleep. Myne falls asleep quickly, resembling a small child. Veit remembers when she told him she is a specter and cannot die. She came for a reason. When Veit asks his sword, named Greed, what they are fighting against, Greed tells him to be patient and not delve too deep for now. Everything will be revealed in time. The scene shifts to Princess Roxy, where the brown-haired girl asks about the arrival time. Roxy says they are very close to the borders of Galia, and the guard Mujin informs them they are nearing Hausen, where Commander Barbados resides. The brown-haired girl asks about the current lord of the castle, and Roxy thinks Lord Leech is in control. Unbeknownst to her, Veit and the man with him killed Lord Leech, the giant lord. Finally, they reach the castle filled with monsters and fiends. Roxy mentions the absence of monsters indicating the castle's liberation. The castle's commander, Harun Barbados, introduces himself and Roxy's guard kneels in respect. Harun is surprised to meet the head of the Barbados family, one of the 5 great families. Roxy apologizes for their sudden arrival, and Harun talks to her, noting her growth. Roxy is amazed that he knows her. The commander tells Roxy that he knew her parents, Mason and Aisha, and they asked him to give her a name at birth. Roxy is surprised as her parents never told her about this, and the commander explains that he doesn't know why they didn't inform her. He then reveals the reason for his retirement. After losing those he was supposed to protect, there was no reason to continue fighting. Roxy asks if he is the one who defeated Lord Leech, and he clarifies that it was a joint effort with a young man. The brown-haired girl expresses her desire to meet and talk to the young man, prompting Roxy to inquire about his name. The commander mentions that he left, and Roxy asks for the names of both the young man and the boy who fought with him. The commander apologizes for not informing her of their names and recalls the young man instructing him not to disclose any information about him. Roxy then asks if they are heading to the city of Galia, and the commander reveals that there's only one reason a holy knight like him would come here. He questions her about Fleric, wondering if he sent her. Roxy clarifies that she doesn't work for anyone and is not a mercenary. She explains that she follows her father's advice to help those in need and fight for the greater good. The commander realizes that Mason, her father, has passed away, expressing sorrow, and then asking her if she is willing to undergo training. Haroon begins training Roxy similar to what he did with Veet. He wants to see how well her father, Mason, had trained her. He appreciates the skill she inherited from her father and is intrigued by the determination in her eyes. Roxy admits she needs more training to protect her people, and Haroon agrees to help her. The emotional connection with Mason's legacy makes Haroon offer to train Roxy without hesitation. Then we move to Veet and his friend Myne as they have been traveling for a very long time since the last time they stopped. They come across this desolate town, completely destroyed and devoid of any living creatures. Myne reveals that she was born in this place and was taken to the imperial capital immediately after her birth. This shocks Veet as he believed that Galia had collapsed 4,000 years ago. They explore the town until they reach a place with a massive structure. Veet is puzzled and asks Myne if it's a shrine, but she doesn't respond. The sword Greed informs him that it's a chimera, a biological weapon tested by Galia's army in the past. They used a container to mix various creatures, creating simple monsters. Veet is astonished by the size of the chimera and learns that the experiment was a complete failure. It was supposed to be eradicated in the past. Myne then declares that it's time for payback. Veet realizes that he will help her fight this creature. He examines the monster's skill screen but finds errors. Greed explains that the monsters are mixed, making it difficult to read their individual skills. Veet is shocked by the monster's power, with incredible statistics. Myne reveals that the monster is still in the larval stage, so they can defeat it before it grows. Veet is surprised that it hasn't grown yet. Myne asks Veet what he can do now, and he understands that she wants him to use his soul-devouring ability, the sin of gluttony, to inflict damage. She explains that they can harm its body as long as its soul remains intact, but it won't die that way. Veet understands that Myne wants him to use his sin of gluttony. She informs him that it's the deadliest and most extravagant of all the deadly sins. Myne wants him to use it now. Veet is puzzled but accepts. Myne leaps into action, surprising Veet with her incredible strength and skill. He witnesses a girl appearing from within the monster, and she looks at Veet with red eyes. At this moment, the monster moves to attack them. It's an enormous creature, and when Veet sees someone inside its chest, he questions Myne about it. Myne, with the same red eyes, informs him that the monster is trying to intimidate him, and he shouldn't look directly at the girl inside to avoid being paralyzed. Veet heeds her advice, refocusing his attention. Veet asks Myne again about the girl inside the monster. She explains that she is the essence of the chimera and needs him to defeat her. Veet contemplates that if he consumes her soul, she'll suffer eternal torment. He realizes he can't do that, but remembers Myne's warning not to be deceived by appearances. The monster disappears behind human skin, and there's no other way to stop it. If he doesn't do as Myne instructed, he will die. He can't remain in such naivety. The monster roars loudly, prompting Myne to grab Veet and swiftly move away. The monster unleashes its tremendous power, striking the area around it. Veet holds Myne's hand, and the monster attempts to hit them with powerful flames. Myne urges Veet to retreat, and they manage to escape the powerful volcanic-like fires. Veet considers using the Black Reaper, and the sword informs him that this indirect attack inflicts damage through the use of flames. The Black Reaper can't directly cut the monster. Veet and Myne look back and see that the monster is trying to catch up to them. aiming to strike them with the intense flames. Myne tells Vite they need to separate to fight from different positions. Nothing happens to Vite and Myne as they manage to evade the fierce flames, resembling volcanic eruptions. Myne then rushes forward, striking the monster's limbs to dislodge it from its position. Vite transforms his sword into the Black Reaper and aims it at the monster's side to halt its movement. Vite is pleased with what he accomplished, but the sword warns him not to rejoice yet. It's still too early. The battle continues, and Myne instructs Vite to stay vigilant. Then, something extremely strange happens. The monster regrows its lost arm. The sword communicates with Vite, explaining that this chimera can continue fighting endlessly without pause or fatigue. Vite is troubled, unsure of how to defeat and kill it. Meanwhile, Myne aggressively attacks the monster, and her strikes become even more powerful than before. The sword informs Vite that her sword becomes heavier and stronger after each swing. But the downside is a reduction in her wielder's agility. Suddenly, the monster screams in a terrifying manner, leaving Vite puzzled about what is happening to it. Abruptly, the chimera enters a transformation phase, revealing wings. Myne instructs Vite to stay behind her to avoid harm. In that moment, Vite imagines that Lady Roxy is in front of him, contemplating whether he can truly lift his head high and claim that he is assisting Lady Roxy. He expresses a desire for change, to become a strong person. Then he tells Myne that he is entering a state close to his hunger evolution, warning her to be cautious. Myne acknowledges the warning, and Vite, with his hand on his eye, activates his gluttony skill. He must control it. Otherwise, it will be futile. As they prepare for the upcoming challenge, the monster launches an attack. Vite calls out to Myne, telling her not to pretend to be surprised. He questions if she really thought he would be incapable of this. He removes his hand from his eye, and the gluttony skill has been activated in Myne. A radiant red light emanates from her. The monster, in the midst of its attack, hears Vite addressing Myne and realizes that she is not genuinely surprised. Vite assures Myne that he knows he must control the sin of gluttony, and he must resist it with all his strength. At this moment, the monster strikes them, and Vite calls out to Myne, telling her there's no need to pretend to be surprised. The situation intensifies as Myne's gluttony skill takes effect. The monster attacks them again, but they defend against its blows. They then leap into the air, and Vite transforms his weapon into the optimal state, adding a sandstorm to it. He enhances the sword by 10 of its stats and launches a powerful attack on the monster, completely incapacitating it. At that moment, Myne strikes the monster with a strong blow, but it regenerates and forms a protective barrier. Vite, realizing the limitations of his Black Reaper weapon, consults his sword, which instructs him to read the magical energy flow and target the weakest. Vite identifies the magical flow's weakest point and directs a powerful attack, causing significant damage to the monster. In pain, the monster attempts to escape by flying upward. Suddenly, blood drips from Vite's eye, and his sword informs him that he seems to have reached his limits. Myne insists there's no time to waste, and they must finish off the monster. Vite climbs onto his scythe, and Myne propels him upwards to catch up with the monster before it recovers. Vite questions how he can defeat the monster while soaring through the air. His sword reveals good news. He can use the second level of the secret technique, but he must sacrifice 20 of his stats. Vite agrees and upgrades his weapon to a more powerful state. He aims at the magical energy center, attempting to attack the monster, but it traps him within a barrier. The monster and Vite start burning within the barrier. Despite the flames, Vite tries to eliminate the monster before succumbing to the fire. He delivers a powerful blow with his deadly scorching weapon, causing immense pain to the monster and ultimately defeating it. Afterward, a mysterious girl appears, the core of the monster. Vite realizes this is telepathy ability and witnesses a person with several children. One by one, the children disappear, leaving only the girl and a few others. Then we return to reality, activating the skill of veracity. We see that Vite does not feel the usual joy, but instead experiences a feeling of sadness that tightens his chest. He informs his sword that he is right, whether he is in a deteriorated state or not, as he devoured one of his peers, finding no pleasure in it. Vite is surprised by the sword's words, and we see the monster's remains scattered on the ground. He approaches Myne and asks her if she knew it. Myne tells him that she forgot what happened all those years ago, but if someone like Chimera happens again, it must be killed. Otherwise, many people will die. Veit speaks to himself, saying that it might be him someday. He then asks Myne what would happen if he lost control of himself, and she must kill him. She is the only one who can stop him if he becomes violent. She approaches him, hugs him, and assures him that if it happens, she will kill him. Veit thanks her for that. Late at night, Veit tells Myne that he will go to Babylon. Myne asks where she will go, and she tells him that she has some business. She promised others that she would build a village for them. Before their second meeting, she feels that Veit will be dead. Veit is surprised by her words, and she explains that ascending to a new level in a place like this, resetting all his stats to the beginning, is ridiculous. Myne then leaves, and Veit asks her for help with hunting to improve his stats. At night, we see Veit arriving at Babylon, a beautiful city between the kingdoms of Hassun, Galia, and Aswara. Its walls are made of sturdy material that has withstood attacks from monsters for thousands of years. Then the sword tells him that he is heading in the wrong direction. Veit responds that there must be a gate on the southern side as well. The sword informs him that there is only a northern gate in Babylon, so why build a gate in the south? It would be as if they are inviting monsters to enter. Veit changes his path and asks the sword if its previous wielder also had a deadly sin skill. The sword confirms that its previous wielder had it but died, leaving it behind. Humans perish, meaning they will all die eventually. But that doesn't mean immortality has no drawbacks. Veit asks if the sword can die, and it explains that weapons of deadly sins cannot be destroyed. He then arrives at the northern gate of Babylon, and we see Veit standing in front of meat skewers, surprised by their high price compared to the capital. The high cost comes from the extra effort required to obtain supplies along the way. A guard informs him that the new ruler of Babylon came from the royal capital. Veit puts on his mask and sees Lady Roxy welcoming the people. Suddenly, a strange girl appears behind Veit, declaring that he will die. Veit is puzzled, looks behind him, and sees the girl. She threatens Roxy with death, and the episode concludes, urging viewers to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell for future episodes. The episode begins with these warriors gathering in the city of Babylon. They are skilled mercenaries, former holy knights, and individuals with different backgrounds, all driven by the pursuit of wealth. In Babylon, a city constantly threatened by large monsters, they need to protect the small before the big, dealing with these creatures that occasionally invade the city. We see Veit strolling happily through the city, and then the scene shifts to Lady Roxy standing before a young man with yellow hair and green eyes named Nordren. He expresses his honor in serving her, acknowledging her as the heiress of one of the 5 noble families. Roxy thanks him for his compliment and for overseeing the city's affairs in her and her father's absence. However, Nordren becomes visibly saddened as he recalls being unable to save Roxy's father, Mason, despite being by his side. Roxy reassures him, telling him he did enough to protect her father and that she came to Babylon to follow in her father's footsteps by defending Galia against monster hordes. She extends her hand, and Nordren, with hopeful eyes, shakes it. Meanwhile, a girl with brown hair named Maria notices Nordren looking at her with a strong gaze, prompting her to approach him with the intention of confronting him. However, before she can act, Mojin, holding her by the collar, warns her about the consequences of messing with a holy knight like Nordren. At that moment, Roxy informs them that they will now patrol the city. The scene then shifts to the protagonist, Veit, walking through the city, assessing his daily needs and expenses. Realizing that his current funds won't be enough for accommodation and meals in the expensive city, he turns his attention to the left and discovers a scabbard for his sword. The sword speaks to him, mentioning that the scabbard is calling out to him, but it seems quite costly. The shopkeeper welcomes Veit and presents his merchandise. Still, he quickly grabs Veit's cloak and examines it strangely, identifying unusual burns, possibly from intense heat or something hotter. The sword vouches for the shopkeeper's exceptional eye for detail, leading Veit to trust him. Veit inquires about the price of the scabbard, initiating a conversation about the purchase. The shopkeeper informs Veit that the scabbard displayed is just a model for demonstration. However, if he desires a custom-fitted scabbard for his sword, the shopkeeper offers to make one for him. The scene transitions to the inside of the workshop, where Veit hands over his sword to determine its dimensions. The shopkeeper notes that he hasn't seen a one-handed sword like it before, suggesting it is exceptionally lightweight, despite its apparent value. The shopkeeper quotes a price of around 500 gold pieces for a scabbard that suits such a sword. Upon hearing this exorbitant amount, Veit is visibly shocked, considering it a considerable sum. He declines the offer, hastily exits the shop, and runs away. The scene then shifts to a place where Veit contemplates the need to build a war chest, recalling the shopkeeper's mention of 500 gold pieces. The sword points out that prices are excessively high in Babylon. It decides that they cannot afford such luxuries. At that moment, a group of people approaches Veit, welcoming him and offering him a chance to join them in hunting monsters. They explain that by working together, they can earn a lot of money by hunting monsters. Veit declines the offer, expressing disinterest in joining anyone. The long-haired boy insists once more, suggesting that Veit join them to become stronger given his appearance as a beginner knight. Veit politely refuses, and the boy apologizes before calling his group and departing. Veit then converses with his sword, expressing the need to wear suitable attire to avoid being ridiculed or harassed. Appearance, he believes, is a part of one's defense. They now need to hunt many monsters to earn substantial money. The scene shifts to a place with a green sky, indicating the borders of Galia. Veit detects a foul odor, and the sword informs him that it's toxic algae. Veit covers his face with his cloak to avoid inhaling anything. And as he continues, he encounters a group of powerful orc monsters, approximately 50 in number. The sword warns him that orcs are prevalent in Galia and are intelligent. Veit must approach the fight as if facing a group of humans, showcasing the skills he learned in the past 2 days. Veit attempts to leap into action against the monster herd to eliminate them. But suddenly, some other warriors beat him to the attack. His sword advises him not to wait and instead suggests they go there and steal the spoils. Veit expresses his disapproval, considering it an aggressive act since others have already initiated the assault. The sword counters, stating that there are no good actions or rules when it comes to monster hunting. Veit notices another horde of orc monsters, numerous and planning to surround the warriors on both sides. He decides they need to steal the spoils and protect the warriors, presenting an excellent opportunity for them. Veit launches his attack, engaging the monsters. However, the monsters start hurling fiery arrows at him, and he skillfully deflects them with his sword. Suddenly, he upgrades his sword to the 3rd level, transforming it into a powerful shield that completely withstands both physical and magical attacks. The magical shield acts as an impervious fortress. Veit wonders about his next move to defeat all these monsters, and his sword suggests greedily rushing at them to showcase the immense power of the shield. He runs, successfully fending off attacks and activating his bloodlust skill several times, boosting his skills and levels. He effortlessly eliminates all the monsters, and afterward, he is surprised that his bloodlust skill didn't activate this time, even after slaying all the orcs. The sword explains that this control was the technique Harun trained him on before arriving here. The sword, in its greedy persona, suggests cutting off the orcs' ears as proof of their victory and returning to the city for rewards. Veit complies and heads back to the city to the Adventurers Guild to hand over the orc ears and claim the reward. He enters the guild carrying a large quantity of orc ears, astonishing everyone with the immense haul and how he accomplished it all alone. Veit approaches the guild's clerk, placing the ears in front of her and instructs her to give him the reward for his feat. The employee is surprised by the large number and says she will verify the count immediately and give him what he deserves. Suddenly, the imposing man interrupts their conversation, saying, "Do you think you can just come from behind and steal our loot so easily? It belongs to us." The sword responds, "Greed would have turned you into minced meat, if not for my intervention." The large man tries to reach for the ear that the sword is holding in Veit's hand, but Veit prevents him, telling him that this is his last chance to retreat. The man defiantly challenges Veit, saying, "How I'd love to see you force me to do that." Veit presses on his hands, causing the man intense pain. The other warriors then attack, but Veit effortlessly defeats them one by one until he crushes them all with a powerful punch. Suddenly, one of the warriors aims a sword at Veit's head, but he deflects it with the bag and defeats the adventurer. Afterward, the union employee gives Veit 100 gold coins for his unexpected intervention. The surprise is interrupted when Lady Roxy enters, revealing herself as the one responsible for the attack. However, she doesn't realize that it's Veit specifically because he now wears a mask. Veit is shocked to see Lady Roxy in person. Lady Roxy gathers the weapons from the defeated warriors and throws them away. She acknowledges that while Veit may have gone too far, She partially takes responsibility for the disorder in Babylon due to the absence of the Holy Knight, Mason. She informs Vite that he can face some punishment this time. Vite, grateful for her understanding, thanks her sincerely. Lady Roxy then turns to the warriors, telling them that she can forgive them, but they will spend the night in prison to reflect on their mistakes. As they were all mistaken, this will give them a chance to reconsider. Vite recalls his time with Lady Roxy, always looking up to her, and believes that being by her side has made him grow taller. Then Lady Roxy speaks to Vite, but he never really pays attention to her. She continues calling out to him, and he responds by claiming that he is indeed listening to her. However, Maria interrupts him, angrily accusing him of lying and not paying attention to her at all. She demands that Vite remove his mask when speaking to Lady Roxy, but Vite refuses to do so. Maria tries forcibly to remove the mask, but Vite prevents her from doing so. Morgan advises her that masks are part of the warrior's code and that she should act more rationally. Lady Roxy tells Maria that there's no need for such actions, and Maria reluctantly lets go. Vite expresses gratitude to Lady Roxy for her actions, and she asks him for his name. He introduces himself as Jitha, surprising everyone with this unusual name. Maria accuses him of lying once again, angering Vite, who asks her to be. He later apologizes for what he said to her. Lady Roxy then advises Vite not to cause them more trouble and suggests he pays more attention to his appearance, as it draws a lot of attention. Vite is shocked by her words, but quickly rushes to improve his appearance. Roxy is surprised by his reaction, and Morgan comments that he looks very thin and weak at first glance, but he managed to defeat them all. The sword then tells Vite that as long as he wears the mask, no one will discover his true identity. Later, we see Vite wandering alone in the city, feeling very sad because Roxy saw him in such an ugly state. The sword reassures him that as long as he wears the mask, no one will discover his true identity. Vite acknowledges this and says he knows he needs to take care of his appearance before revealing himself. Suddenly, a person approaches Vite and informs him that he heard in the news about his defeat of a group of barbarians at the switching point. This news has become the talk of the entire city. The person expresses his wish for Vite to wear all his battle gear, and Vite, not understanding, asks who he is. The person reveals himself as Jeed Stratus, the owner of a gear shop that he opened in the city 3 months ago. Vite goes with Jeed to his shop, and Jeed tells him that since his reputation hasn't spread yet, he plans to use all the goods to promote Vite. Excitedly, Jeed asks if Vite would like to work with him, and Vite, finding no reason to refuse such an offer, Jeed is thrilled to have him on board, and Vite tries on a new suit. Jeed asks for his opinion, and Vite, pleasantly surprised, says it's better than he expected. Jeed quotes a price of 80 gold coins, and Vite, thinking it's the cost of promoting his name, laughs. However, Jeed clarifies that if Vite goes hunting, he can earn the money and pay him half the amount. Vite agrees, realizing he misunderstood the deal. At night, Vite goes to the agreed-upon location, but finds it crowded. He enters and sees a beautiful girl, and as he approaches, she tells him she was waiting for him. Vite is astonished that she recognizes him even with the mask. The girl introduces herself as Iris and mentions that they are destined to meet. The sword warns Vite that she possesses deadly sins. Iris then asks Vite to remove his mask, emphasizing that manipulating perception won't work on her. She wants to see him up close, but as Vite tries, he quickly looks away. Iris apologizes, explaining that it's a side effect of her desire skill affecting others uncontrollably. The scene shifts and Iris requests Vite to take off her mask. She assures him that manipulating perception won't work with her and insists on seeing him up close. Vite tries, but he quickly averts his eyes. Iris apologizes, explaining that her desire skill has unintended effects on others. Vite asks Iris what she meant when she said she was waiting for him. Iris reveals that she has been observing him for a long time. Ever since he was in the capital, she considered talking to him when her desire manipulation skill weakened, but she refrained because he would have encountered greed sooner or later. Vite then asks if she knows Myne, and Iris confirms that she does but hasn't spoken much with him. She explains that she and the girl of anger, presumably referring to Roxy, don't get along well. Iris congratulates Vite on killing Haniel, acknowledging that it posed some difficulty. She wants to spare herself the trouble and still doesn't know who transported the chimera to the location where Vite found it. Vite informs the sword that all chimeras come from the capital of Galia. Iris believes that there might still be some chimeras remaining, posing a significant threat. Considering the weakness displayed by the Holy Knights, she doubts their ability to attack. Iris tells Vite that it's time to get to the heart of the matter and that she has something much more important to share. She reveals that he is the reason she was waiting. Vite is surprised, and Iris clarifies that she guards the kingdom for him. This confuses Vite, and she explains that she puts the kingdom's interest above any individual's, even if it means facing a significant loss 500 or even 1,000 years from now. She would agree to such a sacrifice if it benefits the kingdom. Vite asks who she means, and she answers Roxy Hart. Vite is taken aback. The scene shifts to Roxy, where a guard informs her about a minor disturbance in the east of Galia. Roxy decides to move immediately to deal with it. We return to Iris and Vite, where Iris informs him that Roxy will die in Galia. Vite becomes furious, slamming the table with his hand and spilling the drink on the floor. He demands to know why Iris wants to kill Lady Roxy. Iris asks if he knows how to deal with the phenomenon of hatred, explaining that when a monster is killed, the hatred lingers and accumulates over the years, eventually turning into a big monster. The phenomenon itself can occur among humans as well, informing them that the oppression, discrimination, and poverty caused by the Holy Knights, along with all the hatred directed towards them, accumulate within people. Additionally, the death of the only Holy Knight beloved by the people, Roxy Hart, adds to the buildup of resentment. The hatred that will arise from her premature death will consume the rest that has been slowly accumulating, giving birth to a new powerful from among them. A future leader for the kingdom will emerge with astonishing skills. When asked about her brilliant plan, Faizad expresses surprise and tells her that no good can come from Roxy's death. He then breaks the cup, stating that none of the Holy Knights care about others as she does, and her death will not bring anything good to anyone. He leaves, and Ares remarks that the plan has already begun and no one can stop it. Later, we see Vite walking alone, stating that he doesn't care about the plots being woven or who is behind them. He doesn't care about who he might face. The scene shifts to Roxy and the warriors killing monsters, and thus concludes this episode of the anime. To continue watching future episodes, please subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. In an unprecedented episode, a fierce battle unfolds between Roxy's army and the humanoid monsters. Suddenly, another faction intervenes, summoning the sacred bird, whose power surpasses that of humans as it draws strength from beyond the aerial realm. It is now heading to kill Lady Roxy. Will they intervene in time to save the princess? Is it true that Lady Roxy will discover that the person behind the mask is Vite? The plot unfolds dramatically, so stay tuned for the thrilling conclusion. The episode begins with Roxy confronting Lord Corpse in the battlefield, ordering him to draw his sword and challenging him to a fight. Lord Corpse questions if something has troubled her, and then Roxy's friend appears with a paper informing Lord Corpse not to feign innocence. He has been involved in 56 violent incidents with other warriors and caused damage to 20 properties in just 1 month since their return from the Great Valley. How did he manage all that? The sword then speaks, suggesting to Vite that the girl is likely imitating her mistress, Roxy, and is not skilled at it at all. Lord Corpse tells Vite that all those incidents were provoked by others attacking him, attributing it to the cost of fame. Roxy explains that she cannot overlook any more violent conflicts. Lord Corpse asks what he should do, and Roxy instructs him to join the royal army. However, if he refuses, he should think about the consequences, as he might end up in prison. Lord Corpse then surprises Roxy by pulling his sword from its sheath, and when she questions leaving the sword in the sheath, he reveals that it was specially crafted for his sword. Then they prepare for battle, and we see a green leaf-shaped paper flying in the air. Lord Corpse divides it into 2 halves, and the fight between Roxy and Lord Corpse begins. Roxy aims a powerful strike at him, and Lord Corpse speaks to himself, acknowledging that he should have the statistical advantage, but is unable to overcome her. The sword then reminds him not to forget that she is a sacred knight. Roxy lands a hit on Lord Corpse and tells him she won't go easy on him. As Roxy attacks with her sword, Lord Corpse reflects on the technical skills gained from daily training. Roxy interrupts his thoughts and asks if he's daydreaming in the middle of the battle, causing a minor crack in his mask. Lord Corpse realizes that Roxy is targeting his mask. Roxy taunts him, saying that if he won't take this seriously, she'll laugh. She quickly attacks him and Lord Corpse steps back. Roxy informs him that he can't win by just dodging her attacks. If he doesn't want to reveal his identity, he must take the battle seriously. Lord Corpse, acknowledging that he has no choice, prepares for the fight. A bright light emanates from his sword, surprising everyone, especially Roxy, who realizes that this sword technique belongs to the sacred sword. Lord Corpse explains that the sheath is specially crafted for his sword and enhances the techniques of the sacred sword. Roxy expresses astonishment that he can use such a technique without an actual sacred sword. Lord Corpse tells Roxy that he mentioned before that the sheath is made specifically for his sword and that, in reality, it is an addition to his weapon, enhancing the techniques of the sacred sword. Roxy remarks that if he has the skill to wield arts of this kind, he must have been a former sacred knight. However, Lord Corpse corrects her, stating that he is just an ordinary warrior. Lord Corpse then launches an attack on Roxy, and we see Roxy's friend, who is visibly frightened, as she realizes that Roxy is at risk of losing. Lord Corpse delivers a powerful blow to Roxy, causing her to step back. He tells her that he will win now. A surprise awaits Lord Corpse as he notices Roxy's necklace, shaped like a butterfly, realizing it is made of that precious gem. Meanwhile, Roxy attacks him, striking his sword to send it flying upward. She informs him that she left an opening for her to attack, and Lord Corpse admits that he missed it. Roxy's friend then speaks up, stating that Lady Roxy will not lose to a dull blade like his. Roxy questions Lord Corpse, asking why he's holding back in the fight. Lord Corpse claims ignorance, which angers Roxy, and she asks him not to pretend to be foolish. She inquires if his sword skills and fighting style were learned from Sir Arun, as it is evident because he trained her during her journey to the city. It confirms that it is indeed the case, and Roxy wonders why he is not putting up a serious fight. Lord Corpse replies that he doesn't know what she's talking about, prompting Roxy's frustration. She then asks if his skills were influenced by Sir Arun, and Veit suggests that someone must have controlled him. He recalls the large monster with the same emblem as the salamander. Veit wonders to himself if Iris is behind all this. He then discusses with Mogan, mentioning that Mogan's detailed analysis using the camera was a bold and impressive idea. Veit is astonished by Mogan's incredible ability to explore and analyze matters simply by looking at them. Mogan reveals that he was raised by a highly educated family in science and technology, where his father was a talented researcher just like him now. But she is not like me in intelligence because she is very smart. Veit tells Mogan. He explains that the cameras and artificial monsters were created using technology belonging to the city of Galia. Veit suggests allowing Mogan's daughter to examine one of them might be a good idea. He proposes that when they go to that place, Mogan's daughter can come along to see for herself. Mogan becomes enraged, interpreting Veit's suggestion as an attempt to introduce him to Veit's daughter. In this moment, Veit is shocked and flustered, clarifying that it was not his intention at all. Mogan, in anger, declares that he will not allow Veit to meet his daughter, Rainy. Veit becomes more and more flustered, assuring Mogan that it was not what he meant. Mogan then shouts loudly that he will not permit Veit to meet his daughter, Rainy, leaving Veit even more bewildered. Veit tries to explain that it wasn't his intention, but Mogan runs after him at high speed. The scene then shifts to Rainy, Mogan's daughter, who is questioned about Rafael by someone while she is in the lab preparing some chemical compounds. She tells her friend that rumors say Rafael locked himself in his room and is now studying the great philosopher's stone. Apparently, he went on a research trip to Tamborin before Heidu's death. Rainy, excited, reveals a blue book stating that it contains information about the philosopher's stone. She mentions that it is believed to have healing powers, but she clarifies that true healing comes only from God and anything else can only be a contributing factor. Rainy explains that it also grants immense power to its owner, but in return, overpowers the mind and body. It has complete control over both. The scene then transitions to Veit, asleep on his pillow, looking up and thinking about something. He recalls the girl from Galia talking about the field, and when he asked her what the field was, she explained that it's a level of power where the sacred dragon resides. If one can't reach it, they won't be able to fight it. However, if they push themselves too hard, they'll lose control entirely. Veit asks her how he can reach that power level, and she responds that if he presses himself too hard, he'll lose control of his skills entirely. How can one reach that power level? Veit wonders, but he returns to reality, rising from his bed upon hearing alarm sirens blaring in the city. It seems that there is some impending danger. The scene shifts to Lady Roxy, questioning what's happening when the commander of the Royal Guard enters, informing her that there is a massive crowd. He mentions a death march heading their way, and she instructs them that they will go and confront it with full force. The scene transitions to the colossal monsters crawling on the ground, causing chaos. Roxy is organizing the army, stating that they will fight and protect the city until death. We then see the city residents evacuating rapidly, resembling refugees fleeing the area. In a dramatic moment, the narrator draws a parallel between these monstrous creatures attacking the city in Israel, portraying them as aggressors killing innocents and using destructive aircraft against Palestinians without mercy or compassion. The scene shifts back to Veit, waiting eagerly above. He observes the royal army led by Lady Roxy charging swiftly towards the enemy. The sword speaks to Veit, stating that she is moving with great force, being the commander and will easily end the conflict. Veit's eye, now red, has been activated and he has better control over it. The sword instructs him to focus, as they need to be ready to move at any moment, discovering what is happening and putting an end to it. At this moment, the sword reveals something strange, detecting enemy movements from the east. When Veit looks in that direction, he sees something peculiar moving across the ground, resembling a whale swimming in the water. It appears to be enormous, and if it continues in that direction, it will be under the royal army in just 3 minutes. It becomes apparent that they need to intervene now because the royal army, led by Roxy, will be in significant trouble if they face a sudden attack. At that moment, Veit transforms his sword into the deadly bow and aims his spear unerringly at the direction of the strange creature. We see Veit using the partnership skill to amplify the shot's charge and give it multiplied range. This is a modified art that can only be used when facing imminent death due to starvation. When Veit observes large monsters, this skill activates automatically. Veit then charges his spear with substantial energy, referred to as the spiral shot, and directs it towards the strange creature. The projectile penetrates layers of the ground at maximum speed. The enormous monster appears bearing the same emblem as the chimeras and salamanders. Upon seeing this monster and recognizing the emblem, Veit decides to reveal who is behind it this time. He runs into the void to attack the monster, and afterward, Veit laughs. When his sword friend asks why he is laughing, Veit explains that he was thinking about something. He never considers jumping from such a great height before. Veit descends with all his strength to strike the monster. It's time to find out who this is. However, when Veit looks at the monster's stats, he realizes that it is a crowned monster. Its endurance, magic, and spirit stats have all exceeded 10 million. Any holy knight would undoubtedly be in significant trouble facing such a creature. Continuing the translation into English, it appears there is more content, so please let me know if you'd like me to keep going. At this time, the sword requested Veit to transform it into the magical shield. Veit complied, protecting himself from the monster's attacks. Veit wasn't sure about the nature of what the monster was releasing, and the sword informed him that it was a powerful acid with a repugnant odor. It combined both acid and corrosion magic, making it dangerous not only physically but also magic. The sword warned Veit never to touch it, as the consequences would be fatal. Veit acknowledged the danger and understood that if the monster were cut, the acid would spread everywhere. He then used a heavily enhanced arrow with a significant amount of fire to strike the monster and evaporate the acid. However, the monster disappeared and reappeared behind Veit, intending to attack him. The sword explained that the monster had separated into 3 parts and sent one part after Veit to delay him from reaching Roxy. In response, used his power to transform the sword into another shape. The sword informed him that the monster was ignoring him and it was just a trick. Veit wasn't convinced, thinking no monster could perform such a feat. However, he realized that the monster had only one core. After moving underground, it would have to resurface, and when it did, Veit aimed to crush its core. Then Veit jumps towards the monster with his powerful sword, unleashing a shot of the blood orbital Terramugan, a highly charged projectile. The sword expresses concern as they haven't tested this before, but Vate assures it can penetrate any defense and reach the core rapidly. Vate fires this shot at the monster, activating his predatory skill, but he doesn't understand why it isn't affecting him. He managed to extract the monster's soul, yet nothing happens to him. Suddenly, a figure appears on a mountain, and Vate becomes tense because the person wears a mask similar to his, manipulating perception like his own mask. He thinks it might be Iris imitating him and rushes towards her to confirm. However, when Vate looks at the sword that the masked person carries, he finds it's a weapon from the deadly sins, the Black Pistol Sword. This makes it highly probable that this girl is Iris. At this moment, the sword understands that what happened to these monsters is a kind of magical shot that brings out latent power, leaving the essence intact. So the core remains separate, and this is what the enemy who duplicates endlessly does. This formidable foe is a severe adversary for Vate. Suddenly, one of the monsters attacks Vate to kill him. Vate decides to counterattack by entering its body, fighting with immense ferocity. The sword informs him that if his stats suddenly rise, he might push his skills to work excessively. Vate decides to kill Iris and shoots an arrow towards her, but she effortlessly deflects it with a magical barrier. His sword warns him, saying, "Look at your stats. You've reached the highest level a human can achieve. Now you must ascend to non-human levels like the Field A." In this critical moment, Vate realizes that his attacks are ineffective against this formidable force. His sword informs him that anyone who has reached Field A is immune to the attacks of anyone else. Despite Vate's attempts to attack the mysterious person, he proves to be incredibly powerful, effortlessly repelling Vate's assault. The malevolent figure taunts Vate, stating that he's wasting his time. The malevolent person then strikes Vate with his sword and unleashes successive magical spheres. Vate swiftly activates his magical shield, deflecting the attacks, but he falls to the ground, blood pouring from him. Acknowledging the strength of his opponent, Vate resolves not to wait but to be ready for death no matter the cost. In this moment, he requests his predatory skill to grant him the strength he needs. His power increases significantly, entering field, terrifying the malevolent person. He expresses gratitude for meeting him, acknowledging that he wouldn't have reached this level of strength without encountering him. He then strikes the malevolent person with his sword, but the adversary manages to deflect it with great difficulty. The malevolent person escapes by leaping high and using monsters to hinder Vate. However, Vate surpasses these obstacles. The malevolent person resorts to shooting numerous magical projectiles, but Vate, now able to see them clearly, dodges skillfully. Mephisto creates a smokescreen, suddenly appearing before the malevolent person. Vate attacks, shattering the malevolent person's mask into two halves. Suddenly, Vate discovers that the malevolent person is Nordren. Vate informs him that this is only half the truth, expressing more concern about heirs. Without warning, Norden pulls out a small flute, whistles into it, and summons a large dragon in the sky heading west toward Lady Roxy. Norden states that he and the sacred dragon will exert all efforts to kill her, urging Vate to do everything to stop them. Nordren unleashes numerous magical projectiles to hinder Vate from reaching Roxy. Surprisingly, a wall of slime monsters appears, attempting to delay him. Vate manages to overcome the obstacle from another side. We then shift to Lady Roxy with her soldiers, facing the challenging battle against these monsters. Suddenly, the sacred dragon appears, commanding the soldiers to find a safe place to hide. Lady Roxy stands alone to confront the dragon. Sacred Dragon strikes her with a powerful blow, but Vate arrives just in time, using his strong shield to block the attack. The dragon attacks again, and Vate successfully deflects it once more. However, Nordren's mask shatters completely, and raging Vate, fueled by anger and determination, ensures that no one can harm Lady Roxy while he's present. He tells Lady Roxy that he hasn't seen her in a long time. The episode concludes, leaving viewers in anticipation of the next thrilling events. The narrative promises more excitement, and the audience is encouraged to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell for the latest updates. In our previous episode, we witnessed Roxy in a fierce battle against the soldiers. However, the sacred bird appears, aiming to target and kill her. In the nick of time, Vate comes to her rescue with his colossal shield. In those crucial moments, he unveils his face, and Roxy recognizes that it is Vate behind the mask. Unfortunately, Her arm is brutally severed in a shocking turn of events. In the upcoming thrilling episode, it remains uncertain how Roxy and Vite will cope with this dire situation. With Roxy's severed arm and the revelation of Vite's identity, the suspense builds as they face the challenges ahead. This episode marks the culmination of the anime series, so continue watching until the end to unravel the full story. This episode is truly breathtaking, making it the best episode you'll experience in this anime. Our story begins when Vite delivers a powerful blow to the sacred bird. When Vite's mask is unveiled, Lady Roxy calls out to him. He turns to her, welcoming her warmly, as they haven't seen each other for a long time. However, Roxy is shocked and taken aback when she looks into his red eyes, recalling something from the past. At this moment, Vite urges her to leave the place quickly, revealing that the sacred bird will attack again shortly, and they have no more time. He apologizes for lying to her all this time, expressing gratitude for everything that happened between them. He reminisces about the memories they shared before swiftly departing, leaving Roxy behind. She is overcome with intense sadness, crying heavily at his departure. We then witness Vite finally reaching the colossal monster. The powerful young man stands atop the beast and informs it that this task won't be as easy as expected. Vite shouts at him, telling him to shut up completely, and unleashes a destructive force capable of obliterating anything. Then he strikes the giant monster with it, and the sword informs him that it has been hit, and now it is restrained. However, the monster is more powerful than expected. It retaliates by directing a barrage of gunfire-like blows, unleashing fire on the enemy and the aircraft, yet Vite effortlessly evades and counters with ease. He then collides with the yellow-haired boy, who is astonished by Vite's ability to restrict the movements of the sacred dragon with unparalleled skill. Vite explains that he did it so they could fight man to man, not wanting anyone to interfere in this fierce battle that resembles a true duel between justice heroes and the forces of evil. We see Vite and the boy engage in sword combat. However, Jasha informs him that his stats have decreased after using magical art. The yellow-haired boy acknowledges Vite's prowess in combat but delivers a powerful strike that causes the ground to explode beneath them. Vite retreats and narrowly avoids the attack. In this situation, Jasha advises him to stay close to the monster, because if they move too far away, the monster's restraint will be released, posing a significant danger. The monster fights with the yellow-haired boy while Vite fights him alone. However, the clever boy discovers this formidable plan and realizes that if he distances himself, he won't be able to maintain the magical art and restraint. Enraged by the boy's revelation, Jasha attacks him with a dangerous strike, unfortunately resulting in the severing of Vite's arm. Vite screams in agony from the intense and painful blow, collapsing to the ground. The boy then informs Vite that his time is up, standing in front of him to decapitate him. However, something strange happens. The boy is suddenly stabbed from behind, and his sword tears through his entire abdomen. It is revealed that Vite was incredibly clever. He used an ability called illusion magic to deceive the boy into thinking he was incapacitated and unable to move. He'd approached from behind and killed him outright. Afterward, Vite finds himself in a strange place and wonders where he is. The white-haired girl approaches him, revealing that she had tried to warn him several times before. When Vite looks at her, he realizes that she is the girl who was the essence of Han Yil, the giant monster fought in the city of Galia. She introduces herself as Luna and thanks him for killing her, surprising Vite. Luna tells him not to be saddened, as it was better for her this way. She then apologizes profusely and explains that she cannot continue to suppress her bloodthirsty instincts. Vite expresses his surprise upon seeing the monsters and the bloodthirsty ability, mentioning that it had been calm all this time thanks to her. Luna explains that she was the one doing it, but now she can no longer control it. She informs him that if he manages to devour and consume the sacred dragon, he will lose control entirely. Vite is taken aback by this revelation, and Luna pats her head, stating that she was the one who used to do that. Then the bridge collapses beneath Vite's feet, and he falls. In the last moment, a hand is extended to him, saving him. However, it's not a girl who saved him, but Jasha Sif, who now appears in a human form. Vite is surprised by this development. When Jasha saves him, Vite stands before him, casting strange glances. Jasha warns him not to stare at him like that, as time is running out, and he needs to return quickly. During this time, Vite turns to Luna, thanking her for the warning and the things she had been doing for him. Back in reality, Vite grabs the sword with his right hand, as that is the only hand he has left. He asks the sword if he was a person before, and the sword tells him that he was just a regular man. However, now they must kill the giant dragon, especially after it finally freed itself from the restraint. Joshua then roars with immense strength, heard by everyone in the vicinity. The sword inquires about Vite's plan. It's challenging to use a shield or a bow with only one arm. Vite thinks for a moment and asks the sword if he ever desired to fly before. The sword doesn't understand what Vite means, but soon we see Vite throwing the sword into the air, aiming at the monster. Indeed, Vite directs the sword to the heart of the beast, then runs towards it, delivering a powerful punch, what he calls the destruction punch. The sword returns to him, and he scolds it for being thrown without permission. Angry, the sword demands Vite to recognize the monster's skill. Vite evaluates the monster's abilities, finding that all its levels are high, but it has a slight advantage in statistics. Vite tells the sword that in this world of superhuman strength, he doesn't trust numbers much. The sword asks him to identify the monster's skill, and Vite discovers that it excels slightly in the field of non-human power. The sword expresses skepticism about relying on such vague terms, but Vite insists they focus on what they can do. Then we see Vite charging at the monster, slashing both of its arms with a single strike. The monster falls to the ground, and Vite decides to enhance the sharp-edged skill with the power skill to multiply its impact. We witness Vite attacking the monster, slicing it in half, causing the creature to die. Afterward, Vite activates the bloodthirst skill, and at this moment, he falls to the ground. A significant amount of blood spews from his mouth, and he panics, fearing that he might die. Vite understands that if bloodthirst manifests now, it will be terrifying, and he will become a more significant threat than the sacred dragon. Desperately trying to prevent it, Vite attempts self-healing, but realizes he cannot continue. Bloodthirst is about to activate in a dangerously intense manner. Despite the sword's warnings, Vite apologizes, admitting he has nothing left to do. However, Vite calms down momentarily, and his levels return to a lower state. If he goes berserk again, the damage will be at its lowest levels. Vite falls to the ground, and at this moment, Myne approaches him. She expresses surprise that this day came so soon and dismounts. Myne tells Vite that she didn't think this day would arrive so fast and offers to kill him immediately. Vite, greatly frightened, pleads with her not to kill him. Myne reminds him that she warned him before that if he pressures himself too much, the skill will overpower him, making him lose control. Vite apologizes again, and Myne decides to fulfill the promise she made to him. Myne grabs her sword to strike him, but Roxy intervenes just in time to save Vite. Vite is astonished to see her and questions why she did that. Roxy yells at him, expressing her disbelief that he would try to kill himself. Vite asks her not to look at him like that, and Roxy, not understanding what Vite was trying to do, scolds him. Vite then requests her not to look at him like that ever again, not wanting her to see him in such a state. Roxy, still not comprehending Vite's intentions, assures him that she could never hate him in such a way and doesn't care about the strength he carries. She tells Vite that he will remain as he is, and he should never try to kill himself again. Vite said to her, "This is strange. Bloodthirst was raging a moment ago, but now it has calmed down." Roxy spoke to him, saying, "Let's go back to Babylon." Vite was surprised, looking at her, thinking to himself that he was afraid she would hate him. But she accepted him even after knowing the truth. He wanted to save her, but in reality, he wanted her to save him, just as she did before. Vite then loses consciousness and falls to the ground. The next day, Vite wakes up in a room at home, remembering that Nordrin cut off his left arm. He wonders how much time has passed while he was asleep. Myne and Eris enter, and Myne informs him that he has been asleep for a whole week. Vite is astonished to find them there, and Myne teases him for sleeping too much. Eris comments that he can't do anything about it, considering he overuses his strength. They hand him the sword, and Vite talks to the sword, asking if it just realized it was. Vite answers negatively, and the sword remarks that he seems to be in bad shape. Eris suggests going to the Galia Center to find him. Vite questions why the sword is not dirty, and the sword replies that it thought it would never return. Myne adds that it was too far away and a source of annoyance. Vite asks what he was doing there, and Aris explains that they believe a monster carried him all that way, as Myne forgot about carrying him. Myne says she was preoccupied with dealing with others, and Aris mentions it would be bad if another vessel like Nordren were found. Vite expresses surprise and asks what happened with Nordren and the Envy. Myne explains that Nordren was under control, like a puppet, by the Black Pistol sword. Vite is shocked and asks what the Envy is. Aris clarifies that Envy was controlling the sword. The sword admits it had no idea it could control minds, but considering the terrible situation Vite was in, it's not surprising. And the deadly sin's weapons cannot be destroyed. Aris said to Vite, after defeating the Holy Dragon, "Prove your capabilities. We need your help, and there's no longer a plan to create an ascended human with Roxy's death." Vite told her, "Swear to me that you won't seek Roxy again. I'll listen to what you have to say." Aris agreed, admitting that Envy was the one who originally suggested it. She acknowledged that she was foolish for agreeing after the Holy Dragon's departure. Now, with a new era approaching, they will need Vite's strength. Every holder of the deadly sin's skills is expected to take responsibility for it. Vite, still puzzled, mentioned that he was born with the bloodthirst skill and believed there must be a reason for it. He wanted to know that reason. Aris explained that first, he needed to do something about the seed. Vite was surprised and asked if she would heal his arm. He had never heard of magic like that before and wondered if he would regain his arm. Aris informed him that they needed to leave before Roxy returned. Vite asked why, and Aris explained that it was extremely dangerous for him to be near her now. Just hearing her name increased bloodthirst. The scene then shifts to Myra training with a sword, being defeated by her captain. Suddenly, Myra sees a girl named Rainy. The guard looks back and finds nothing. We learn that Myra tricked him, and there was nothing there. As Roxy was about to strike her with the sword, Myra noticed her and rushed to ask where she was going. Roxy instructed her to take care of things in her absence and left. This angered Myra, who bet that Roxy was going to see Vite. The scene then shifts to the market, where Roxy stands in front of grapes. She later goes to Vite's room, but he's not there. Surprised, Roxy places the grapes on the bed and finds a letter on the desk. Vite apologizes for not informing her about his bloodthirst skill and thanks her. He explains that he had to leave suddenly but promises to return. Roxy reads the letter, expressing her emotions, acknowledging Vite's struggles, and noting the courage he gave her. At night, Roxy walks through the city and encounters a lonely child. She advises him to return home, emphasizing the danger of wandering late. The child fears Roxy and asks her not to hit him. Roxy questions why he thinks she would harm them, and the child explains that he angered a holy knight. Roxy apologizes and expresses shame for the fear people have of holy knights. Suddenly, she hears a growl and realizes it's the child's stomach. Roxy prepares a box full of food for him. The child, grateful, explains that he doesn't have a family waiting for him. Roxy is surprised, and when the child leaves, she asks if he has a place to stay. He tells her that he doesn't have a place, but now he realizes that the capital is not as bad as he expected, and he is very happy because he met a kind holy knight like her. Roxy then asks for his name, and the boy tells her his name is Vite before leaving. Roxy speaks to herself, expressing how that moment allowed her to lift her head high and be proud of being a holy knight. She stands in front of the window, wishing to meet Vite again and vowing to become stronger when that day comes. The scene shifts to Rafael and his sister talking, realizing that the deceased lord was Vit. Rafael finishes his coffee, informing his sister that he's leaving for some research and will return to it. His sister wonders what Rafael is doing with this research. The scene then transitions to Rafael in his room, talking to himself. He expresses joy that Vite killed Hado. Suddenly, a red light emanates from the gem in the box, and Rafael laughs. And thus, this anime comes to an end. Stay tuned for a new anime, but you need to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to receive all the updates. Continue to follow us for more exciting content.